My college takes star signs way too seriously. Is that understood? The college dean was lecturing me, and I was staring down at my lap, trying to fathom how I got myself in this situation. I had guards standing behind me acting like I was some escaped psychopath. Every time I moved, I noticed them snap to attention in the corner of my eye. I was supposed to belong here. I was supposed to find myself. But all that I had found was a student body that was deadly serious about separating their students according to their zodiac. My gaze flicked to an astrology chart on the wall, with the school's least favorite sign scribbled out in permanent marker. The dean's office was an astrologer's wet dream. The dean herself was my mother's age, a scowling woman who was more shadow than person, a projector illuminating constellations across the room, casting her face in an eerie white light. I had been lazily following Orion across the walls when she finally snapped, and I jerked to attention, my gaze flicking back to her. "Miss Oliver." I nodded in response, my cheeks burning. Orion skimmed across her face, and I found myself mesmerized by how beautiful the star was. Her office was fairly cozy, a messy kind of cozy. There were books and papers piled around her, empty coffee mugs and what looked like star maps spread across her laptop, coffee staining each corner. It was a mistake, I finally said through the gutter in my throat. It wasn't a mistake, but it's not like I could say that. For some reason, along with this college's draconian rules mapped around the zodiac of all things, there was one star sign in particular that had been outcasted. I turned my attention back to the scribbled out symbol. Gemini. If there was ever a zodiac that was hated or not liked, Gemini was never that star sign. I grew up with kids in my class hating Pisces because they refused to be related to a fish, or Cancer because of the crab. Gemini was in these summer months, and the constellation in my opinion was beautiful, but not to these guys. Starting my freshman year, I started to realize how badly the Gemini students were being treated, with the guys getting the worst of it. Being a late admission, I was new along with another kid who appeared to be the joker of the class at first. He was friendly enough, introducing himself with a grin. We were asked for our star signs as an icebreaker, or what I thought was an icebreaker, and he shrugged with a small smile. I think I'm a Gemini." He sounded unsure of himself, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I was born on June 10th. I'm a Gemini." I expected that to be the end of it, but I noticed a sudden shift in the air, like the guy had just announced that he had murdered his whole family. The girl sitting next to him inched away slowly, dragging her laptop with her, while the rest of the class seemed to collectively let out a breath before twisting to the back of the class. It was almost a robotic movement, their heads snapping around, eyes narrowing. I didn't even see them. The four students in the shadows, heads bowed over their MacBooks. The professor's expression seemed to crumple, his eyes darkening significantly. "I think," he spoke in a sharp breath before seemingly collecting himself. "I think you should join your friends at the back," he said coldly. Until then, the professor had stapled himself as a cool teacher. A man in his early 40s sporting a long trench coat over jeans and a t-shirt. Very chic, but now it was like looking at a different person. He took slow steps back across the stage, almost stumbling. I could almost mistake his expression for fear. "I said," the professor's voice broke around the words and something ice cold wriggled its way down my spine. "I think you should join your friends." The Gemini kid seemed baffled and a little hurt. The air was thick, every eye burning into him. I felt like they were looking at me too. The professor's eyes were wide, lips curled like he might say something, but he just shook his head, seemingly gathering himself. I'm confused. The kid laughed nervously, almost jumping out of his chair when a girl behind him kicked his bag across the floor. He sent her a questioning look. Is this some kind of joke? No. The professor wasn't even looking at him. But, the boy tried to laugh. It's just a star sign, right? I will not ask you again, the professor said stiffly. He didn't move as if doing so would mean being closer to the boy. He folded his arms across his chest. If you do not move to your designated seat right now, then you're out of my class. To my surprise, the boy got up and moved to the back, ignoring students cringing away from him. He didn't speak again, sticking to his assigned group. I noticed that everybody else had been separated into their zodiac signs. Leos were at the front, with Sagittarius and Libra surrounding them, and the other star signs were harder to make out. I thought it was just that class who were taking these zodiacs a little too seriously. But no, this thing had spread across campus like a virus. Students didn't care about their grades or what careers they were going to get, because these star signs in the top of the social hierarchy had the faculty wrapped around their little fingers. A Libra girl found out that she was no longer compatible with a Scorpio and stopped talking to him completely, ghosting him on social media and going as far as moving halfway across the classroom from him. The entire campus had gone crazy, including the faculty. But it was only certain star signs who were allowed extra credit and invited into exclusive clubs while the rest of us were left in the dust. And Geminis were either treated like dirt or feared, like they were carrying a contagious disease. It was like going back to middle school. In the 6th grade, I was proud of my star sign. I like to think that I had a secret twin after learning about the story behind the constellation. Castor and Pollux, twin brothers transformed into Gemini. I used to draw the twins on the back of my hands, daydreaming my very own. Mina Lucas, a Pisces, called me two-faced because Gemini had two faces, and so I called her an ugly fish. This was middle school though. It is normal for kids to build personalities around their star signs. But for college students, however, they're grown adults. It was fine to base a crush around a star sign or compatibility, but your whole life, your social circle and education. It was bad enough that my classmates were brainwashed by stars, but the professors too. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense that my roommate had a mental breakdown the night before because she didn't have anything blue to wear. According to her star sign, she had to wear blue to have a good day. Geminis were either mercilessly bullied by students and professors alike, or treated like they were invisible. I had noticed over the last few days that disgust had turned to fear. Instead of bullying Geminis, other students steered clear of them. I saw it contorted on every face, wary of the Gemini sitting near them, and presently, I saw it on my dean's face. She was scared of me. The woman may have seemed in control, but I noticed her finger anxiously tapping on her coffee mug, her gaze flashing to and from the clock on the wall. She was waiting for something, her demeanor tense, her eyebrows furrowed. Every passing minute seemed to unnerve her even more. A mistake, she repeated my words, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, I didn't look her in the eye, swiping my clammy hands on my jeans. What was I supposed to say? I didn't want to associate myself with what I thought was a trend, a TikTok thing that would fizzle out like everything else. But I was staring down at a handwritten letter crumpled between my fists of an anonymous tattletale calling out my real star sign. The crossed O's stood out. Who wrote like that? I had been hiding under the facade of being a Sagittarius since Sagittarius and Leo seemed to be the it signs. They stood on some pedestal ruling over campus like some messed up clique. The letter was like a slap in the face. I had half a mind to tear it into pieces. I stared down at it, my eyes stinging. This letter told me that I didn't belong here. It told me that because the brainwashed hive mind on campus had decided to collectively despise the star that I was born under, that I was something to be feared, like an animal. Who sent it? I managed to get out. I squeezed the paper between my fists. Dearest Dean, the passive-aggressive tone made my blood boil. I would like you to know of a traitor amongst you, a Sagittarius by the name of Oliver, who was in fact a Gemini. I am so sorry for ruining your day. Anonymous. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When I looked up, the dean's glare was pinpointed directly in the middle of my forehead. If looks could kill. I don't know what to say, I squeezed out. She hummed. Well, you can start by explaining yourself. She had to be kidding, right? No, when I looked her dead in the eye, this woman was being serious. Miss Oliver, I am horrified that you would disguise yourself as a Sagittarius. She curled her lip. As one myself, I should have sensed that our energy was wrong, polluted with your presence. But I let my guard down. I slammed the letter down this time. This woman was certifiably insane. Who sent this? I said again, this time harsher. That is none of your concern, the dean said. You lied, Miss Oliver. About my zodiac sign? I sucked in a breath. It's really not a big deal. Her eyes darkened. As you will discover, Miss Oliver, it is extremely important that we know where every Gemini is. Her gaze flashed to her MacBook screen, especially when certain measures have been put in place. Measures? I straightened to my seat. What kind of measures? Her lip curled. You are a late arrival. It is your fault for not arriving on time. You're kidding. I found myself speaking through a scoff. I was done. It was one thing with students doing this, but grown adults. She was enabling this bullying, inciting a fear that shouldn't exist. It was like being on a playground and some stupid kid pronouncing that Gemini smelled, and the rest of the kids following along, forming a hive mind. But this was a 40-something-year-old. The dean couldn't justify it, and even if she tried, she would be declared insane. I leaned forward, testing the boundaries. I wasn't surprised when the dean lurched back. Was it a bad experience? She blinked. I don't understand. A bad experience you had, I repeated, with a Gemini. I could sense the words suffocating my mouth, eager to slip out. After weeks of feeling like I was back in the 6th grade, finally confronting the root of the problem felt good. Platonic or maybe sexual, I inclined my head. Or maybe he or she ghosted you completely, so you brainwashed a campus full of impressionable young students to punish people who cannot help being born between the months of May and June. I felt satisfaction when her expression twisted. Because that is all it is, what you're all unhealthily obsessed with. I spoke through my teeth this time, weeks of repressed anger bubbling over. They're just stars, I said. They don't mean anything to anyone except children. Miss Oliver. See? Tracing along the constellation mapped out on her desk, I prodded each static light. To my confusion, it was the Gemini constellation, which was ironic. I stabbed at the 2 twin stars, Castor and Pollux, and then Alhina. I nodded to Orion projected across the wall. Stars, they're just stars, dead and dying planets, or if you're religious, your long dead relatives, whatever. I pointed at the map crinkled under a MacBook, and the dean once again flinched, her body angling its way away from me. She leaned away from me like I was contagious. One of the guards started forwards, no doubt to grab me, but she shook her head, maintaining that professional if not slightly strained smile. "There's no need." The dean spoke in a sharp breath and the guard stepped back. "Miss Oliver is understandably upset." She cleared her throat. "Please vacate your current dorm and move into the old building across campus where we house Geminis without rooms." The dean stood before I could reply. "I don't expect to see you in my office again." I grabbed my bag, getting to my feet. "You're not throwing me out." Her lip twitched. "We do not suspend Gemini students, Miss Oliver." "But what if I want to leave?" Her facial expression didn't waver. "I'm afraid that's not possible." I nodded slowly, not completely registering her words. "So you're saying that I can't leave?" She shook her head. "I'm afraid not." I glanced at the guard behind me. "Why can't I leave?" "Because of the measures in place." Something warm wriggled its way up my throat and I tried to speak before the guards were politely shoving me out of her office. The dean's words didn't leave my mind until I was halfway across campus and out of breath, and regretting every word that I had spat. She had sent me away with a warning and in order to leave my dorm room effective immediately and move into the old building off campus. I had seen it in passing, a large crumbling structure which used to be the old student dorm. The door was broken, bars on the windows. There was no way that I was staying there. Instead, I figured a couch crashing in a friend's dorm would be better. Elle was a Leo and insisted that she didn't care about star signs. Coming from a Leo that was rich, she had the all-exclusive Leo experience. I was moving into her room later into the evening, playing cloak and dagger with these security guards on shift, when the announcement played on the intercom. "Starting from 8 p.m., please lock all Geminis in the rooms. It is upon us." Elle froze up, her eyes widening. Until that moment, she had been unusually quiet, the two of us sitting cross-legged on the floor eating Chinese food. But I thought that she was just tired from classes. Elle didn't react to the message at first. She sent me a sleepy smile and then told me that she was going to grab a beer from the kitchen. What I didn't expect was for her to come back wielding one of her mom's butcher knives. I stepped back, but her eyes terrified me. Her entire body was trembling, fingers tightening around the handle. Her expression contorted with that same feral fear that I couldn't understand. "Elle," I bit back a cry. "Hey, it's me, it's Smith." "Get out," she spoke through a sob. Her ponytail swung around when she twisted to the door. "Please, I don't want to hurt you." She waved the knife manically and I raised my arms, my heart catapulting into my throat. "You have 15 minutes. The voice drawled and Elle's expression hardened. "I repeat, please lock all Geminis inside their rooms immediately and find a safe place. This warning will expire at 5 a.m., 8 hours from now." A sudden bang outside set off my fight or flight, doors slamming and running footsteps. I found my eyes glued to the blade in my best friend's hand. They were serious about this. The dean really had turned a whole campus of students against one singular star sign. Elle's frightened eyes found me and I lowered my arms. "What, are you gonna stab me?" I took a slow step back towards the door. Because I was born in May. I couldn't resist a laugh. "You told me that you didn't care about the zodiac. You said that all of this was BS, so why now?" Another step and she squeaked. "Do you want to fit in, Elle? Is it like peer pressure?" She didn't respond and that pissed me off even more. Elle didn't know why she was afraid of me because her head had been filled with crap. I raised my arms in a mock surrender. Why are you looking at me like that? Al, I'm not going to hurt you. When have I ever? I didn't expect to cry, but my eyes were stinging. I could hear screaming, Geminis being attacked and locked up. I risked a step back and her grip on the knife had changed, like she was ready to use it. You're brainwashed, I said slowly. The dean wants you to be scared. She's crazy, Al, like delusional. She has some crazy vendetta against Geminis and she's punishing us. Al choked out a cry. Last month, she spoke through a sob. One of you got into my room. Al shook her head rapidly, squeezing her eyes shut. Just leave, she squeaked. I'm sorry, Smith, I'll explain, I promise, but you need to find someplace else. It can't be here. She smiled, but her lips were strained and her eyes were wide. When I moved to try and reassure her, she jumped back, like a deer caught in headlights. She was terrified of me. Lock yourself up, my friend said softly, and I realized that I had lost her. But don't hurt yourself, Al sniffled. They can climb through the windows and sense light. They follow it, so make sure to turn them off and stay down. Her expression darkened. Can you promise me something? I found myself nodding dizzily. Al squeezed her eyes shut. Don't look up. My gut twisted into tangled knots. What? Al's words had set off something inside me, but she was already dropping the knife and grabbing me gently and pushing me through the door. I was being shoved out into the hallway, my bags thrown in my face, when the alarms had started blaring, red lights swarming the hallways. I saw shadows darting in and out of rooms, others being shoved inside while retreating figures made for the elevators. A boy was violently dragged out by a girl and thrown on his butt. At that moment, I stopped seeing students, kids. I was seeing wild animals crawling backwards on their hands and knees, frightened eyes darting for a safe getaway. A girl ran into me, dropping onto her knees before catapulting into a sprint. She was caught by 3 guys who dragged her away, kicking and screaming. I had no choice. It was 7:50 when I found myself standing in front of the old building, halfway across campus, the alarm still ringing in my ears. The dorm was more of a boarding house with maybe 2 or 3 floors. The night felt eerily still, a half moon poking from the clouds. There was something glued to the front of the door, a simple white sheet of paper. On it, scrawled in permanent marker, was "No" in bold letters. The O was crossed, I had noticed, which was familiar. 5 minutes. The intercom screeched, and in my panic, I knocked 3 times. Hello? I banged again. Hey, can somebody let me in? I swallowed thickly. My star sign tangled in my throat when there was a crash behind me and I twisted around. A group of students were dragging 2 others, bound and gagged, hauling them into a car trunk. With my stomach trying to projectile into my throat, I turned to knock again, finding my fist meeting something warm. There was a shadow standing in the doorway with warm golden light bleeding around him. I could barely see his face, only a mop of light reddish curls. He tugged the paper off the door and held it out. The handwriting stuck out. No means no, he said and moved to slam the door. I forced my heel in the way, blocking him. He tried to shut the door on my foot, and in my panic, I shoved it back in his face. He didn't try again, but I made sure to not let my guard down. You told the dean about me, I hissed. I'm sorry, did we go back to 6th grade? He made a snorting noise. Well, look who's talking. What? The shadow paused before stepping out into the light. I glimpsed narrowed eyes and freckles. I made a move to shove past him, but he stood stubbornly in the way. His eyes were shaded by a scuffed pair of Ray-Bans. Ah yes, the traitor, he said, who was hiding in Sagittarius and didn't think that we would notice. He gestured behind him and something jingled. Looking closer, there was something metal attached to his wrist. "And we turned your room into a panic room, by the way," he deadpanned. "So like I said," the guy pointed to the stupid sign. "No means no." His lips formed a spiteful smile, and behind me, another crash. Something ice cold ran down my spine. I couldn't bring myself to turn to see more brutality. The guy had visibly stiffened up, nose flaring. He hiked his glasses up his nose, revealing eyes shadowed by an eerie glow slowly spreading across his pupil. His gaze followed mine. Another kid was being mercilessly dragged across the parking lot. When I turned back to the guy, his expression had darkened. He slid his glasses back into place with emphasis. "Have fun locking yourself up," he said, saluting me with 2 fingers before stepping back. Another jingle and he flinched, and this time I saw it clearly. A rusted chain wrapped around his ankle and right wrist. The guy noticed me staring, lips curling into a scowl. He stepped behind the door, clearly embarrassed. "This is your 2-minute warning." The intercom was still loud, even halfway across the grounds. Hearing the announcement, the kid gently kicked my foot out of the way, and I almost fell on my butt. "Goodbye," was all that he said dryly, and he slammed the door a little too hard in my face. I could hear voices when I was shuffling back. I checked my phone. 7:58. Crap. Across campus, the warning lights were still flashing. "Why did you do that?" Another guy's voice hissed from behind the door. "Because she's a traitor." "Yeah, but she's stuck out there," a girl joined in. "Aren't you being a little too harsh?" "Nope." I left them to argue, making it back onto campus. 7:59. Bathroom. That was all that I could think of. I started toward the main building when movement flashed in the corner of my eye. I saw them pouring from campus, illuminated in brilliant orange from the torches in their hands. Leos. I recognized several faces from my class. They moved as one, a large group heading across campus toward the clearing in the woods. They wore pajamas, normal clothes like they were going to hang out, but something in the air and prickling across my skin told me different. There were exclusive clubs on campus, but this was a whole other level. I ducked, mapping a way to get on campus without being caught. If I could get to the door and make a clean break through the cafeteria, I could dive into the girls' bathroom next to the elevator. I dropped to my knees in an attempt to crawl when I saw her. The bright red hair was a giveaway, her bobbing ponytail frenzied as she joined the others. L. Another frantic look at my phone. 8:02. I didn't expect her to see me. She was looking around frantically, unlike the others whose eyes were set forward. It looked like she was looking for a way out, staggering over uneven ground. And then her eyes found mine. Initially, Elle looked relieved, and then her gaze went to the sky, flicking back to me, her eyes widening. She hesitated before stumbling over to me, pulling something from her jeans pocket. It was a much sharper knife, the blade glinting under moonlight cast across the grounds. "Tell me your name," she said in a squeak. "I need to know it's you." I had half a mind to question her before I remembered the Gemini boy chained up. "Smith. I'm Smith." Elle hesitated. She twisted around, scanning the night, and turned back to me. Her frenzied eyes searched mine. "What is my most embarrassing story?" "What?" In 2 single strides, she was holding the knife to my throat, her hand trembling. The steel was cold, and I had no doubt that she would press deeper. "Say it, Smith, word for word." Behind her, the Leos were gone, with some stragglers left behind. I nodded slowly, trying to ignore the blade digging into my skin. This was my new normal. You had your period in your boyfriend's parents' new car," I whispered. "You still have nightmares." Her expression crumpled with relief and she dropped the knife. "How about mine?" I urged her. Elle surprised me with a quiet laugh. "Oh, you barfed tacos all over your crush on your first date," she choked out, "and he never talked to you again." I started to speak and Elle tugged off her jacket, wrapping it around my eyes. At first, I fought back before her hands and then her fingernails dug into the bare flesh of my arms. Her touch was reassuring, dragging up my arms and then grasping a hold of my shoulders. "I told you not to look up." Her voice came out in an annoyed hiss. "I didn't." But I bit back a cry when she dug her nails in further. "What's happening? I'll explain later." "How can you guys tell who are the Gemini?" I whispered. "I don't get it." Elle didn't respond for a moment. "Your eyes," she whimpered. "It's in your eyes." "What do you mean by that?" "Shush," Elle muttered. "Just stay quiet, okay?" Elle pulled me to my feet and I staggered blindly, trying to balance myself. "I'll take you to a bathroom," she breathed, shoving me forward. "But if you tell anybody that I helped you..." "I won't." I tripped over something, almost falling on my face. The further that we were getting, I could sense something. Light. It started as a pinprick behind my eyes before spreading. Bleeding light fraying through the material of Elle's jacket. There was one bright splodge of light and then another, and another. Speckled illuminations like glitter illuminating the night. "Closer," they told me. I followed them almost giddily, watching them burn through Elle's jacket. When the sound of thundering footsteps sliced into me, I turned my head trying to sense where it was coming from. "What's that?" I didn't realize that I was laughing until manic giggles spurted from my lips. It was like being high, my thoughts bleeding into cotton candy. Suddenly, all I wanted was to see the lights. They felt so far away and yet also like I could reach them, plucking them straight out of the sky. I laughed again, my body a puppet as I reached out and tried to catch them in my palm. "I said be quiet," Elle whisper shrieked. "I am." I was curious about the light. It was so bright and I was missing out on fully taking it in. I stumbled again, this time my footsteps tangled. I didn't hear the voice until it was in my head, a whisper telling me to pull away the blindfold. It was choking me, suffocating my thoughts and filling me with the taste of her. I saw it, just a glimpse, dancing across my vision. I had my fingers clawing into Elle's jacket, ready to rip it off when someone else did it for me. "Leo, what are you doing out here?" The voice was familiar, but it was being drowned out by its light, its song. "I'm locking her up," Elle said shakily. Darkness made way for light and I blinked rapidly. I could sense my head tipping back and then Elle's fingers in my hair, trying to shove my head down. Blinking rapidly, I saw the dean of the college and my best friend's pale face. And then I saw the stampede, suffocated in shadow, silhouettes passing me, ethereal light illuminating otherwise vacant eyes. The lights resembled stars themselves, dancing through the night. It was the same light that was seeping into me. It felt cozy and warm, already ignited inside them. I could tell who they were from the attempt to lock themselves up. I glimpsed handcuffs around wrists, makeshift ropes still clinging to arms and ankles, duct tape over mouths. When my gaze followed the horde, I caught sight of a cuffed ankle, a strayed chain trailing behind him. The guy who locked me out. He moved slowly like a zombie. His glasses were awkwardly placed on the top of his head, eyes drowned by that light. It was teasing me, seeping into me like honey. But it wasn't moonlight. I could glimpse the crescent glowing under the clouds. Geminis. They were bathed in it, a swimming glow that I wanted to dive into. All of them. Where were they going? Unlike the Leos, their expressions were blank as they staggered along, akin to a crowd of zombies. I remember not being able to concentrate on the Geminis because something had a hold of me and it wasn't letting go. I felt it reach directly into the back of my head, phantom fingers taking me into its grasp. I didn't mean to look up. I tiptoed my head back, drinking in the sky above me in the night that suddenly felt alive. The Gemini horde stopped suddenly, head stepping back, glowing eyes following suit. I blinked twice and Elle was already covering my eyes, and I wrenched her hands away so that I could see clearly. I could feel it, sense it consuming me, filling my thoughts with a lulling fog. Smith! Elle's eyes found mine and she dropped to her knees. It was like she was scared of me. I remember her lips had formed the words in breathy sobs. Don't look. Before she could reach up, I blinked again, and this time it was a longer one. I started toward something. It was there, I just had to reach as high as I could, and then I would be able to touch it. Starry eyes surrounded me, but I don't remember being scared. Elle's cry rattled in my skull as I felt my body lurch on its own, driven by something else, a sentient thing inside me. I could feel my mind filling with fog. It told me to go to sleep, and I did. When I came to, it was no longer night. Artificial white light buzzing above me. The first thing that I felt was something wet oozing down my chin, and then cool porcelain pressed against my cheek. I was in a bathroom stall, my head stuck down a toilet bowl. But it was different to waking up hungover. I felt filthy. My body was aching, a striking pain rippling across the back of my head. When I lifted my neck slightly, a snapping sound made me jump, like my bones were popping back into place. My memory was gone and my thoughts were a whirlwind lost to the dark. I could still see Elle's face illuminated in that startling light. The shadowy horde around me, starry eyes burning into me. And then there was nothing. The familiar ice-cold grays of porcelain greeted me when I pried my eyes open. There was something in my stomach and I spat it out, expecting stale barf. What I wasn't expecting was a wet piece of flesh to splash down into the bowl. It took me several seconds to realize the toilet bowl that I had my head down was not empty. In the flickering light from the broken light fixture above me, I saw the glistening red first, spattered on the lid, and when I looked down on the floor too, it was staining my knees. And then I saw all of it. The bulgy, slimy red mess sticking from the bowl. I lurched back and something was stuck at the back of my throat. I reached into my mouth cringing and pulled out what looked like a mauled finger, skin to flesh. There was only spiky pieces of bone fragments clinging to shredded muscle. Something inhuman croaked from my lips and I slammed my hands over my mouth, my gut twisting. I looked up, red. I looked down, more red, vivid and wet and recent. I was covered in dirt and grass stains, my legs bloodied and bruised, and half my hair ripped out. The walls around me were the same shade, a glistening, pooling, disgusting red, dripping and staining every surface. The lumpy red mass sticking from the toilet bowl suddenly looked less like a mass, the more that I was looking at it, blinking through blinding light. At some point I screamed, heaving up the rest, wet globules of fat spilling from my mouth. There was a head in the toilet bowl stuck right under, like I had been trying to hide the evidence. The head didn't look like a head, half of its skull crushed, but I could still make out familiar features. Eyes still wide open, lips frozen in what looked like a scream. The rest of her had presumably been flushed, but I could still see pieces of her clinging to the rim of the toilet. Elle. Oh God, I killed my best friend. I'm still sitting here and I can't bring myself to move. Normal college life still goes on outside and I can't understand how. I ask this as a Gemini, preferably on campus, but this goes for all of you. Did any of you kill and eat somebody last night with no memory of doing so? I'm starting to think the Gemini constellation is something more than a group of stars after all. I think it's alive. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. With prices going up on just about everything lately, being smart with your money isn't just a good idea, it's essential. But managing subscriptions, tracking spending, and cutting costs can feel overwhelming. Lucky for you, Rocket Money takes the guesswork out of it so that you can easily make smart decisions. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Rocket Money also sends alerts if bills increase in price, there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over budget. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Download the Rocket Money app and enter my show name, Creepypasta, in the survey so that they know I sent you. Don't wait, download the Rocket Money app today and tell them you heard about them from my show. Hi, my name is Alex and I live in this rather small farming town. We have a church on the hill and one very local grocery store, and somehow there's a Dollar General too. Life here is rather simple and easy. I wake up, I turn on my studio, and I broadcast music for the town. It's nothing special, just classic rock and some country, but I make decent money off it. One thing I noticed our signal never goes past is the town borders. My only guess is that there's something to do with the magnetosphere, but I'm no scientist. About a year ago, around the middle of August, something weird started happening. Military trucks and other large equipment started showing up in town. They took over the church as a base of operations. They even put large fences and barbed wire all around it. Whatever they were doing must have been serious. It wasn't but a few days after they did that they started testing the air raid siren that we have. The only way to really get to it was in my shed, as I owned the radio station, and enough power supply to run the siren and the station if there was a blackout. So, guess what the boys did? If you said annexed my station and shed, you are correct. It wasn't really a big deal, they sounded like they needed it for something, and they'd been paying me twice what I was making, so I'm not really angry at all. So, I've been staying at my little brother's and his new wife's home for the past few years. The day that I moved in, it was all nice and happy, until at exactly 1 p.m., all the military guys started corralling all the people to their homes in a rush too. They seemed scared, like the whole lot of them had seen a ghost. It's a silly thought, I know. However, they weren't taking no's as they were really rough with the townsfolk. Looking through the blinds, I see that they were all done getting everyone in their houses. Maybe they're running some sort of test. Well, it turns out that less than 10 minutes after that, we hear the siren go off. Stay inside and go to the nearest room without windows. If you can't, close the blinds and cover your ears and eyes. This is not a drill. Do not leave for any reason. If someone is caught leaving, they will be marked as a threat. If you hear knocks at the window or door, do not answer it, even if it's family or friends, and even if they're in a dire situation. Again, this is not a drill, and we will let you know when to come out. It went on with this same message for a few hours. I was in my room, which luckily is located in the basement. I could hear someone upstairs slamming on the doors, and I can hear my brother talking to his wife. "We gotta check, honey. It's my friend, Aaron," he said in a hushed tone. I slowly walk up the stairs and hearing his wife say, "Well, here, take your gun and at least be ready for anything." As I got to the top of the stairs, I creaked the door open to see what is going on. Aaron, I'm going to open the door, but you gotta run in fast, okay? I can hear a muffled, "Hey, 10-4, buddy." It wasn't Aaron. It was something deep sounding that I felt. Immediate fear, and I closed my door before they opened their front door. I heard Aaron say, "And ye shall overthrow their altars, and break their pillars, and burn their groves with fire. And ye shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of that place." After that, I heard shots fire. It was my brother, I'm sure of it. His wife Sammy was screaming and tried to come into the basement with me, but I locked the door. I heard the false Aaron walk up to Sammy as she was screaming. It was then that I heard the cracking and twisting of bone. Her cries went silent, and so did the home. I could hear Aaron eating. I kept my face covered as the smell wafted through the air. I could see what was left of them flowing through the bottom of the basement door. It wasn't long when I heard this thing knock at my door. "I know you can hear me, child. Do not be afraid, as we are here to cleanse these sinners, leaving only the saints. You are not a sinner. You can let me in." I didn't know what to do. I was frozen, but it felt like it was speaking into my brain. The sound of horns were ringing in my head. "Child, you cannot ignore me. I am all that was and will be. I know you." I uncovered my ears and checked up the stairs. I noticed the door got unlocked, so I yelled back, "What did you do to my brother? What is it that you want?" At this point, I'm nearly pissing myself in fear. "Your brother and his wife committed a grave, unforgivable sin. We cannot let it slide. Let me in, child. You need not be afraid." I sat there thinking, and I slowly walked up the stairs. It felt autonomous, and I couldn't stop my own movement. "There is no fighting this. You are a saint, and you will obey and listen." I do not know what to do at this point. What did he mean that I'm a saint? It was then that I slowly started to twist the doorknob. At full force, the sirens were wailing once again, and I regained my consciousness and composure. I quickly locked the door again and ran down the stairs. I could hear the thing say, "We will meet again, my child. Go now on God's good grace." This voice was loud and thundered in my head, leaving my ears to ring. I could only hear the siren afterward, and what sounded like giant wings flapping in the distance. "Civilians, coast is clear. I repeat, the coast is clear. We ask you to stay in your home so we can do some research. Please bear with us a little longer, thank you." It clicks off and these sirens start to die down. It wasn't but a few minutes when I hear, "Oh my God, they've got another. Search the house for any survivors." I slowly opened the door and yelled, "I'm alive, please help me." It was then that the door swung open as a large man pulled me into the kitchen. I found myself around 5 men armed to the teeth pointing guns at me. "Test him," one guy said. I was immediately shoved against the wall, and the guy, testing me, grabbed my arm and stuck a small needle and injected something. "What are you doing to me?" They all stared at me, waiting for a reaction. However, nothing happened. They all collectively sighed in relief, and the one that tested me said, "You're coming with us. We have to ask you some questions." I looked around, and the bodies of my brother and sister-in-law weren't there. All I could see was a black ash scattered throughout the kitchen and by the front door. "What happened to them?" I asked. They seemed to ignore my question, and we walked outside. I could hear crying throughout the town. It looked like entire families were just erased out of existence. Some people never came out to look around. They were all probably scared out of their mind. I'm not even sure how many disappeared, but it had to have been in the dozens. We arrived at the old church. They opened up the front gate and they let us in. I can see that it was being patrolled by drones. Everywhere that I looked, there was a camera and no one was stationed outside. We get inside and it looks like they removed all the pews on the altar. Countless days I spent praying with my brother in these very halls, running around the pews after hours while our father talked to the priest. I started to cry. I missed the little brother I once raised and played with. Seeing all that stripped and replaced by all kinds of machines, cables, and chairs. Almost 100 different monitors, each with a person watching hours of surveillance footage. My brother gets slaughtered like a lamb, and now this. It was way too much to handle. I broke into tears, and so I shouted, "Okay, I'm here now, so what the heck do you want?" "Sir, we know this is all too much, but we have to talk to you." I calmed down a little. I never was confrontational, so I took a deep breath and I kept following them. They led me into the basement. There was high-end security scanning their eyes, and it looks like a robot arm came out of the wall and poked them with a needle. Must be the same stuff that they had used on me. We passed through the security and walked down a hallway to a room at the end. This was the pastor's room. He had lived in the church, but he had passed a few years back. He was a good man. It feels kind of wrong going into his room. How many hours had this man poured into his community to save us in a time of sorrow? I remember it like it was yesterday. My father passed away when I was 16, leaving the radio station to me. I remember the priest here consoled me and said, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." It was a beautiful funeral. The whole town came by and hugged my brother and I. We only had each other at this point, so I made it my mission to always take care of him. I saw the photo my dad and the priest took together. He was so happy back then before Mom ran off. He was hardworking and always gave his time to help others in need. A good man. I'm happy that I got to know my father and remember talking to the priest in this room about some of the funny things about him. The memories come flooding back and I began to whelp a little. I took a deep breath, in and out. I had to swallow my feelings down as I was disassociating. It was then that I was asked to sit at the old oak table and to wait here. The man who had escorted me here asked if I needed anything. A Coke?" I said, quietly holding my face in my hands. "Got it." The officer left the room. A few minutes later, someone else entered with 2 Cokes and a notepad. "Hello." He looked at his notepad. "Alex, I'm the leader of this op and we have some questions about what you saw. Here, you asked for a Coke, right?" He handed it to me and I took it, opened it, and took a large gulp after I let out a sigh. "I want to know where my brother and sister-in-law are before I answer anything." The man looked me in the eyes and took his sunglasses off, and I saw his eyes. They were all white like he had cataracts. "Your brother and sister-in-law are gone. We cannot help them now." He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "And you survived and resisted. We need to know why." I slammed my hands on the table. "No, people don't just disappear." He tossed a file that he was holding in the notepad to me. "Read. It'll explain everything." I opened the file. Inside was a series of pictures and notes. The pictures looked to be giant winged beasts of just floating eyes and wings. This was in front of my home. I started to sweat and I turned to the next image. The beast changed shape into Aaron, and then the last picture was it grabbing my brother's head and ripping it off. I remember dropping the pictures and throwing up on the floor. "What is that thing?" The man put his glasses back on and handed me a tissue. "It's an angel, Alex. Your brother and sister-in-law committed a sin. I'm sorry, but they're gone. We don't know where they took them, but it looks like that they're just gone. With no trace but black ashes that aren't even made of carbon. It's an element that we have yet to classify. I got myself together and asked, "Why are you guys wanting to talk to me then? I didn't do any of this." He pointed to the file and said, "Keep looking." As I was flipping through, the angel turned back to its normal form, and you can see straight into the home past the kitchen to the door that I was behind. But I wasn't. I was in front of the door, and I was staring at it. Why? Why didn't it attack me? The agent took the files back and said, "Very few people survive this, so let's get down to the point. You are a saint. Somehow, you are on a whitelist with these things, and so far, you and I are the only known ones." He sighs and says, "That's why we came here, to find you. Everyone else in this town is either gone or scared out of their mind. We have to make them forget everything." I grabbed my head in confusion, running my hands through my jet black hair in a feeble attempt to calm myself. "Why me?" I said quietly. I could feel my heart racing. Heat was rushing to my face. "You never committed a sin, and it's physically impossible for you to do as well. You can continue your life here, or you can choose to come with us. But in a year, they will come back." I thought to myself, I've got nothing left. My family is all gone, and my job was taken from me. I want to stay, but I feel like I'm safe with these people. Can we wait a year to see what happens?" I asked shakily. "Yes. We will monitor the area, however, every year on August the 16th. This will happen again. We already sealed the area around the town off, so no radio communication can enter or leave this place. We may ask you to come out during the event so we can monitor you." I took another large drink of my soda. Okay, I'll do it. With the idea of talking to the thing that took my only family away. I was furious. Shortly after, I was released and I went home. It's July now and nothing has happened since, and the missing townsfolk were replaced with agents, but no one other than me seemed to notice. Life has been normal and I was allowed to use my radio again. I'm counting down the days until this happens again. Will I be prepared? How can I stop them? I don't know. What I know is that the days draw closer, and I can hear the whispering of them above, and I know that they're watching. Once they come down here, I will know where my brother is. My brother and his wife's screams are burned into my brain. Another issue is the trumpets are getting louder, and I'm starting to hear chanting and bells chiming. It's day in and day out, non-stop. I've been contemplating ending it. I find myself about to go down that hole of no return and welcome the release of death. However, anytime I get brave enough and I'm about to do it, I black out. I wake up usually on my bed, where I was sitting before thinking about doing it. Whatever is going on, whatever these things want is beyond me, and that's not the worst of it. It's when I sleep that's when the true nightmare begins. I feel like if I tell you guys this, it may help me cope just a little bit. The last message I sent out, everyone was rather nice. It's so much to unpack, and if you have a weak stomach, please skip ahead if you want to. It all started last night. My dream well nightmare began with just a black canvas. It was just me mindlessly drifting in a seemingly infinite void. But I couldn't wake up or move. That's all there was, just me in the dark floating. I started to panic, as it still to this very minute feels real, and with that, it felt like this won't ever end. In my head, what felt like decades pass as I float in pure darkness with only my thoughts. It wasn't much longer, maybe a year or two, it's hard to tell to be honest, that I started seeing something in the distance, slowly approaching me, or was I approaching it? In the distance, there was a long hallway with no end. The hallway looked like the hospital halls that I used to frequent. It reminded me of how my dad lost his life to cancer. All the years that we spent, the countless hours crying and praying for him to get better. So yeah, I know these halls as if they were my home. It was scary how accurate this was, down to the light blue stripe and the off-white color of the walls. I finally floated to this hall and landed on the floor. I kept looking at the checkered, patterned floor, thinking to myself on how life would be different if my father had survived, if my mother never ran away. Would my brother still be alive? And sorry for getting a little emotional, I just have to let you guys know exactly how it was. I decided to swallow my fears and judgment. As I walked down the hall, the only sound was my heavy footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. After what seems like miles of walking, I came across a door. It's my father's room. I see a light on at the bottom of the door, and I can hear something else. It was my dad calling out to me. And so I rushed through the door and saw my dad looking like he did long ago, young and healthy. I instantly rushed in and hugged my father. His cologne smelled as strong as it used to. His hug back was warm and inviting. I haven't felt this happy in my life. There, champ. My oh my, you've grown. Look at how strong you are. You're as strong as an ox, my father said robustly. Thanks, Papa. I've been working on it a lot to help with depression. You don't know, but losing you was the hardest thing in my life. Well, where's little Donnie? I missed him too. My dad tried to look behind me at the door, expecting my goofball brother to burst in. Pops, Donnie. And before I could say a word, he jumps out of the closet and yells, Dad, you're alive. I don't know how to process this. I saw my brother's ashes. Donnie, how are you even here? My brother looked at me. I don't rightly know how, to be honest. I was opening my door for my buddy Aaron, and the next thing I know, I fell out of the closet. As my brother and father hug and catch up, I took a few deep breaths and ran my fingers through my hair, trying to find a way to tell my brother what happened. As I turn around and open my mouth, I hear the trumpets in full force. My head feels like it was going to explode. It was then that I see a grotesque, massive wings circling astronomical rings. On these rings were bloodshot red eyes of varying sizes and colors. Its very presence was distorting space around it. Its mere existence was causing my eyes to blur and my mind to race. As it spoke to me, I could see the axis of all creation merging and twisting. I was able to manage to say, What do you want? The being stopped moving. The sound of its rings were making was akin to rusty metal being ripped. The song of metal scraping against metal is all that I can hear, and in an instant I heard nothing. The darkness was all gone. I looked around and time was frozen, and all there was me and it. Ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the higher mountains, upon the hills, and upon every green tree. It spoke to me. It felt like my very soul was shaking and I couldn't stand on my own feet. What does it even mean? Why are you doing this? I let out with all my remaining strength. I took a deep breath and was able to pull myself up and stare this thing down. My child, you know not of what's to come. You must follow. I am your shepherd and you are my flock. Listen to your heart and hear my love and feel my intent. All of this is but a fleeting existence to the greater tomorrow. Child, Even your family here are nothing but mere devices in a greater story. Screw you, I said as loud as I could push out my exhausted body. Child, I gave you what you wanted most, yet you still deny me. The Lord gave and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, it said. The sound of fluttering wings is all that I heard. Time returned normally. I turned to see my family, my brother, and my father. Something was wrong. They were staring at me with massive grins, unhuman grins. Their smile kept growing, and slowly, I could hear the squelching of their flesh tearing as their faces distorted. I reached out to them to try and stop whatever this was, but I was frozen, forced to watch. Red was pouring from their mouths, and they were crying as they feebly reached out to me. I could see their arms outstretched, twitching, as they lost full control of their own body. It was then that I heard the trumpets again, but this time, it was distorted as if played of key. It was then that my brother grabbed his bicep on his right arm and dug his fingers into it. Red rushed out and sprayed on the floor as he continued to dig. The sound of things snapping and sloughing off his arm was sickening. I watched in forced horror as my brother pulled his muscles out of his own arm and painted the room in a dark red hue. In a short time, I heard my father start to gurgle too. I reeled back to look at him, but I wish I never did. His body was melting as a dark black liquid started to extrude out of every possible opening on his head. The smell was awful, but yet pungent. I watched, and that's all that I could do, as I saw my father slowly turn into a puddle. His very body melting in my own hands, and his bones crumbling to dust. I was left alone again. Even the walls around the room started to decay. The darkness swallowed me once again. Shortly after, I felt it watching me. I swear that I can hear this thing that took my family a second time was weeping. After I turned to see it, it was crying tears of red. I felt nothing but anger as I yelled every curse word in the book, and I ended my tirade with, "I will never help you or your kind. I will let this world burn before I bow to a monster like you." Shortly after I woke up, I sprang out of bed and splashed water on my face. The horns, the sounds this thing were plaguing me with had stopped. A moment of short reprieve. These images of my family are still in my head. Why am I chosen to bear this burden, whatever it may be? Sometimes the good has wicked intent, I suppose. Recently, the townfolk have been acting really strange, and last night was even worse at this point, and I'm fearing that these things are going to take me too. It all started in the morning. It felt normal at first. I woke up, made coffee, and ate some eggs in a basket, just like my father used to make. I decided to turn on my radio tower on to start broadcasting my music as I normally would, when what seems like a woman started pounding on my window. Immediately, this made me spill my boiling hot coffee on my freshly pulled out of the dryer pants. I yelled in pain, "Oh, what the?" Once I pulled myself together, I see this woman staring at me through my window. She was covered in blood. Her eyes were as white as marbles, and she was smiling. Shortly after, she started banging on the window again, this time, and I got to see it. Her hands were missing, and it was just a stub with bits of flesh hanging on it. I dropped down behind my desk and I almost vomited. This lady was my neighbor, Mrs. Jacobson. Normally, she would come by and hand me the newspaper. She and I weren't friends more, just friendly neighbors, and just my mail would often end up at her place. I didn't know what to do as she continued to pound on the window, with each consecutive hit making a sickening noise as the stomp slapped on my window, leaving more and more red behind. I stayed behind my desk as the image of her unearthly smile was burned into my brain. It wasn't more than a few minutes when she stopped. It was then that I decided to slowly peek over the edge. I just saw her standing there, staring at me. No, through me. I could feel her gaze pierce my soul. She slowly opened her mouth and it started to stretch at inhuman length, as her mouth easily grew to be about 1 foot long. "What do you want from me?" I yelled. She just kept looking with her mouth wide open. It was at this moment that I went to the window and just shut the blinds. I could hear her yelling. Nothing that makes sense, it was more just random ghoulish howling, with a voice that was far too deep for her. I called the government guys in the church. "Hey, you guys said I should call if anything is out of the ordinary. Well, right now, Mrs. Jacobson is outside my home banging on my window with a nub and screaming like she's possessed." I waited a few seconds and heard nothing. "Hello?" I asked, annoyed. "We've sent a team. Lock your doors and don't let anyone or anything in." I looked around and just said, "Okay, can do." My office where I run the radio out of has very heavy oak doors. It was carved by my father and was made so thick and heavy that it blocked out sound from our house. My guess was so no ambient noise could bother his work. I rushed to my office doors and right before I can close it, I heard my front door burst open. It was her. She lifted her only hand pointed at me with her freakishly open mouth, and this time her eyes were completely white. She screamed an ungodly scream and started full-on sprinting at me. Now my hallway was not very long, but I was able to slam the door shut and deadbolt the door. She started banging on my door again, and I could barely hear her screams. It felt like hours of her just non-stop pounding on my door and screaming. I was stopped abruptly when I heard faint people yelling for her to get on the ground, shortly after followed by shots. I then hear the men yelling with screams. The bullets that they shot left small holes in my door, large enough for me to peek through. When I peered through one of the holes, I could see this crazy lady devouring these heavily armed men. The sounds that it made were awful. The twisting and grinding and crunching. I couldn't look away, but I was absolutely mortified by this beast of a woman that I thought she was. I kept looking at her grotesque features and noticed her body was healing slowly, growing together. The color in her skin was coming back. She slowly turned her head all the way around like she was an owl. I could hear her spine cracking from the pressure. She could sense me watching her. We locked eyes and she stood up and slowly turned around, keeping her eyes locked on me. It was then that she sprinted at the door, scaring the crap out of me, and I fell backwards, as I could see her eyes now bright white peering through one of the holes. She then spoke. "And thou shalt eat the fruit of thy own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God hath given thee, in the siege and in the straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee." She spoke in a loud and thunderous tone. It was so loud that it made me disoriented. I yelled back, "What do you want from me?" As my vision slowly came back to normal, she spoke again. "Child, you are a key part. You will recognize your role soon enough." Right after, I saw a bright white light and heard the sound of trumpets blaring. It felt like the whole world was shaking. Items were falling off my shelf and my roof cracked as the lights got brighter and hotter. It all stopped and the light vanished. The residual heat was still there, but Mrs. Robinson, or the thing she was gone. I opened the door slowly. All I saw were the bodies of the men and ashes on the floor. My carpet was stained a dark crimson, and the smell of iron and burnt popcorn filled the air. I decided to shut my door and lock it again, and called the command center that was in the church. They asked what had happened, and I explained it all and told them, "Come get these men off my floor, and I'm not leaving this room until it's safer. I will not be destroyed by some old lady. On the other end, all I hear is, understood. You need to stay safe there and bunker down. I hung up and started leaving this note. Right now, they're cleaning the carpet and removing all the evidence. I overheard them saying that they found a slime of some of the bodies. I don't know what to do. Whatever happens next, I sure hope I can end these dang monsters. For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ, and no wonder for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. These words have been stuck in my head, playing on repeat like a broken record. I can feel my sanity fading as sleep deprivation sets in. I feel like there are eyes watching my every move, people narrating my every thought and feelings. I even stopped playing music as more and more townsfolk go missing. It's only a handful that are left from the town originally. For the people who tried to help me, the holy water in the church is locked up for some reason, and I did sew some crosses on me. The pain of doing so wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. It's nothing compared to the mental anguish I've been dealing with. So thank you all for the kind words and suggestions. Recently, besides the constant scripture running in my head, and the occasional townsfolk hulking out and attacking more soldiers, it's been quiet. No one really leaves their home. I don't get calls about the radio, and everyone seems to be surviving off the government rations that they have been giving us. If anyone was wondering, it's pretty bland. Just boxes of potato flakes, off-brand water that tastes like pool water, and bread with some bologna that looks gray in color. Day in and day out, I feel like I'm not being protected but contained, like a prisoner. They even stopped answering my calls, which started this morning. However, some real stuff went down, and I'm not sure if anyone other than me, and maybe some of the town, is still alive. It was shortly after I got ignored when I tried to call into the HQ and report a body in the street. It wasn't more than 5 or 10 minutes when I started hearing the horns again. This time, I learned the horns only played when someone was being targeted. I know this seems inhumane to say this, but I made test subjects out of my neighbors. Once I hear the horns, I go to all my windows and I look around, see what or who is being targeted, and like clockwork, I hear it. Someone begins to scream, and then silence. After so many times that this has happened, I become numb to the cries of the people. I can't stop thinking, they are the lucky ones being taken out and not having to live with these things for much longer. I'm pulling away from the point, so that after the horns this morning, I looked around all over town and saw nothing this time. I kept looking, and it seems that they were all safe somehow. Shortly after, I heard gunfire coming from the church. They're being taken down. I started to hear someone calling out to me. A voice that was very familiar, but I couldn't make it out. All of a sudden, my body moved on its own accord. It was helplessly moved toward the church. It's terrifying to think that you have no control over your own body, safety, or life. With this all left to the will of these angels. Last I checked, angels don't devour humans. At least it was never spoken about. As I started to pass the first gate, the smell of gunpowder and blood attacked my senses. It was so powerful that my eyes began to burn, and I could taste it in the back of my throat. My body slowly marched toward the front door. Bullets were still flying through the door. One struck me. The pain was unbearable, but it was only just the beginning. I could sense time slowing down, or maybe my senses were speeding up. The bullets that went through the door also would pierce my chest, my arms, and neck. Each bullet ripped into me had me experiencing the pain for what felt like years, as time seemed to froze. I was feeling the projectiles tear into me, and I felt every inch give way to the metal. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't cry out in pain or run away. The tearing of my body, had gotten so extreme I felt like I was going to expire any second. Have you ever felt your heart being pierced by hot lead? Or have the feeling of your chest cavity fill with liquid? This must be hell, I thought as my body slowly marched forward. The smoke in the church began to clear, and I saw the absolute chaos that had unfolded. Bodies were everywhere, and they were laying in ways that reminded me of a horror movie. People fused together in the floor, faces missing. One of them I stepped on, making a squelching noise as my foot peeled away a layer of them. No matter what I did or thought, I couldn't stop. My body felt like it was being controlled like a puppet on strings. When I got to the basement, the door was ripped off the hinges with the door itself pushed into the wall. Flashbacks as a child ran through my mind. I remember playing hide and seek in this basement with some of the other kids in the town, many of which I've seen eating other people in all this chaos. I remember my brother and I hiding behind a stack of chairs. We pressed ourselves as low to the ground as we could. We giggled as someone nearly found us. We only got up when we could hear the other boys yell, "All right, we give up. Y'all can come out now." As we stood up, I saw a black dot on my brother's neck. Shortly after, he had yelled in pain and ran out. It was a black widow who had bit him. My brother was rushed to the hospital, which was almost an hour away, and I held his hand and kept telling him, "It'll be okay. It was just a small spider, you'll be fine." Of course, my brother was milking the attention. Some of the best acting I have ever seen was from this moment. After a few hours in the hospital, he was discharged, and ever since then, he had been afraid of spiders. This memory, even with all the pain and crazy stuff, made me smile. It was a relief that was short-lived as I approached the pastor's quarters. The lights in the hall were flickering, and to the left and right of me, people were standing at the wall looking at me, all of them with jet-black eyes and pale skin. The people of this town were just meat suits for these things. I've grown a hatred for them, parading around doing unholy things in people who I considered were friends and family. Even when I tried to think of memories that I had with them, the images of these things were replacing them, corrupting my very thoughts. As I passed all these people, I finally got to the door. It flew open by itself, and I could hear the crunching of bone. It was my brother. He was eating the blind agent. I could only wait as he was in a trance-like state. I was forced to watch my little brother, or what was my little brother, eat the eyes of this person. After the thing was full, he stood up and turned toward me. Looking in my eyes, his eyes were dark and it showed no light. It was all black, and I could feel an overwhelming sense of malice as it just stared at me. My body was still unable to move as it slowly closed the distance. With each step, the feeling of dread grew, and it felt like my heart was getting louder. I could only think to myself, is this what true fear feels like? Will I live for another moment? He got in front of me and said one thing. "A war is coming, and you are a major piece in it. Will you stand by humanity or those winged beasts whom watch over and terrorize you? I cannot make the choice for you, child, but know this. I do love you." This oddly felt genuine, and the feelings of dread and malice were dissipating. I don't know how to describe it other than it felt natural. "Child, I will not harm your brother as he agreed to help me speak to you. The angels above cast him aside like a broken toy. However, I found use in the boy, and together we can take over the heavens. Pray that we succeed, for I have seen the throne of God and it was empty." Who was he? What was he? Suddenly, this being reached down and tapped my forehead, sending me into a deep sleep. I woke up nearly instantly and was in a panic, covered in sweat, and I surveyed my surroundings. Everything was too quiet, so I rushed to look out the window toward the church, and it was all normal again. I quickly called the operation leader, and they instantly picked up. "Yes, Alex, are you okay?" How are they alive? I saw my brother eat him in front of my own 2 eyes. I replied in a rushed and worried tone. What day is it? How long have I been asleep? Well, it's Sunday, and I would say you've been silent for 2 days. I guess that old lady really stressed you out. How you feeling? I could hear typing in the background as if he was typing down our conversation. I'm fine, just had a really bad dream. How many people in the town are left? I asked. Most of them are left. Why? Everything okay? At this point, I decided to look outside, and I saw people walking around and talking like nothing had happened. I'll be okay, thank you. It must have been just a vivid dream. And so I hung up, not wanting to speak about it anymore. I didn't want to go through it again. After, I fell backward onto my bed, breathing in deep and letting it out. The trumpets are not playing, and it was just silence. I'm still shaken up by this since it felt so real. So I'm going to start my radio up and pretend nothing happened. There's one question on my mind. Can my brother still be saved? I may never know. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. What is time? Is it just a construct of a man to keep with the pace of our existence, or is it something more malleable? I can't shake the feeling that I've done this all before. The existential dread of this whole situation seems so familiar. Alright, sorry, you don't know who I am. My name is Alex, and I live in this rather small farming city. We have a church on a hill and one very local grocery store, and somehow there's a Dollar General too. Life here is rather simple and easy. I wake up, I turn on my studio, and I broadcast music for the town. It's nothing special, just classic rock and some country, but I make decent money off of it. Recently, I've been experiencing stranger and stranger events, but it all feels like a dream. It all started when military trucks and other large equipment were being hauled into town. They took over the church as a base of operations, I'm guessing. They even put large fences and barbed wire all around it. Whatever they were doing had to be serious. They came to my door and asked to use the air raid siren. The only way to access it was to enter my shed and turn it on manually. When I told them this, they just said, "That's fine. We'll just go into your backyard once a week and run a test, so don't mind us." I cocked my head a little, as I could have sworn that I had heard this before. "Yeah, that's fine. Just knock on the door before you go back there, just in case." I'm in a stand-your-ground state, so I didn't want to catch a charge for taking out a trespasser. They just looked at me and smiled and said, "Will do, Chief," and then left and got into the truck and drove off. I looked around and across the street from me, and I could see my brother mowing his lawn, so I walked up to him wanting to speak. "Hey, big bro." He stopped the engine of his mower. "Hey, little dude, how have you been? How's the wife doing?" He smiled and said, "Great, but we have big news." I looked at him puzzled. "Well, what is it?" "Sammy's pregnant. We just tested this morning, and I feel like since you've helped me so much in life, you can be the baby's official godparent and uncle, of course." I cracked a large smile ear to ear. "Wow, I'm so happy for you guys." My brother then just put his arms around me and we shared a hug. It was nice considering all that we've been through together. "Why don't we have dinner here tonight? I'm grilling ribs and the wife is making potato salad. You know it's your favorite." That sounds perfect. Been wanting some home-cooked meals. I've been swamped with work and school recently. He just said, "Alright, I'll see you then, but I need to mow. It won't cut itself." I waved goodbye and walked back to my home, so I could start the next playlist on the radio. I get back home, and when I open the door, a wave of emotion hits me like a ton of bricks. I started crying, but I don't know why. My heart is racing, and I could feel anxiety rushing in. I tried composing myself enough to get to my bed, but I just laid there sobbing. Why am I sad? Why is this happening? I thought to myself. Shortly after, I get a knock on my door. It somehow pulled me out of the anxiety attack, which was good. I opened it, and a man with what looked to be cataracts in his eyes greeted me. Hello, Mr. York. How are you? I looked at him a bit puzzled. Just call me Alex, and I'm doing fine. Can I help you? I felt a bit put off by this man. He looked to be blind, but he climbed up the stairs without aid, and he drove here. Oh yes, we need to use the siren, and we want you to stay inside for a few hours. It's for your own safety. I started to panic a little bit, but kept it under so he wouldn't notice. Sure thing, it's back in the shed. The man looked at me and just said, Thank you. Just lock your door and close your blinds. The siren will tell you the rest. I said, Well, aren't you going to be in danger too? He just started to walk away and yelled out, I'll be fine, Alex. The anxiety was welling up in my throat again, so in a hurry, I locked my door and closed my blinds. Shortly after, I heard the sirens go off. Stay inside and go to the nearest room without windows. If you can't, close the blinds and cover your eyes and ears. This is not a drill. Do not leave for any reason. If someone is caught leaving, they will be marked as a threat. If you hear knocks at the window or door, do not answer it even if it's family or friends, and even if they're in a dire situation. Again, this is not a drill, and we will let you know when to come back out. It's oddly specific. I hope my brother will be okay. I waited there in my office and I heard a song on the radio playing, and it was one of my favorites. Time Is on My Side by the Rolling Stones. It reminded me of my father a lot. Him and Mom used to sing this song to us. The Rolling Stones were his favorite band. But all this daydreaming was cut short as I heard a shot across the street. I peeked through my blinds and I see my brother. He was being attacked. This thing that looked like our friend Aaron, but with grotesque and elongated limbs with a massive jaw. My instincts told me to hide, but I couldn't. I couldn't let my brother get hurt. So I ran out and I sprinted toward his home. I needed to catch my breath, but I could see his front door ripped off its hinges. I was about to look inside, being cautious. Maybe I can catch this thing off guard, I thought to myself. So I peered into his home. It was the worst thing that I could imagine. A fine mist of red lingered in the air. I can taste it in the back of my throat. I almost gagged when I looked further in. It was Sammy. This thing was devouring Sammy. It sat hunched over her body, just feasting. I blacked out. After a while, I quickly regained consciousness, and I see the figure stand up with no sign of my brother or his wife. No blood on the floor, just a pile of black ash. The thing turned to me, but as we locked eyes, it started to distort my vision. Every time I tried to focus on it, it would disappear. But I looked slightly away and in my peripherals. It looked to have changed its shape. A mass of wings, 7, no 8 of them, circling something in the middle of it all. It slowly glided to me and I was frozen in place, unable to move or react. My chest felt like it was going to explode. And then it spoke. Its voice sounded like a rusty can being scraped by a fork with the faint sound of horns in the distance. Its thunderous voice shook my very existence as it spoke, and it said, "Be not afraid, child. You will be saved as you are a saint." I keep thinking back to where I've heard this and I can't remember. Was it a dream? In that moment, the massive wings slowly moved toward me. In that moment, everything went black. I saw things I couldn't make out darting across the void in my mind. I heard a scream in my ear, and what got louder was the sound of a trumpet. 6 blasts from a trumpet. No, it was 7. The thunderous voice spoke in my dreamscape, We will meet again, child. A war is coming. I woke slowly, but in the distance, I could hear the flapping of wings and the siren go off once more. Civilians, the coast is clear. I repeat, the coast is clear. We ask you to stay in your home so we can do some more research. Please bear with us a little longer, thank you. Within mere seconds, I was surrounded by men armed to the teeth. Holy crap, he's alive. One of them picked me up and 3 other men rushed into my brother's home. What happened to my brother? I was still barely able to stand on my own. My head was still spinning. He's gone, I'm sorry. I gained a bit more consciousness and realized what he just said. What do you mean, gone? I was fuming. Something had just eaten my brother and his wife. We can't explain right now. We just go home and rest and we'll send someone to speak to you. I reluctantly walked back. But what can I do? Fight the armed men who were just trying to help me. It wasn't their fault. I clambered back into my home and went straight to my bed and I collapsed. I can't put my finger on it, but I sense a deja vu. It's all too familiar and I can't shake this feeling. As I laid on my bed, reliving the thoughts of my brother dying and seeing his wife being devoured, this whole thing seems so surreal. It wasn't but an hour later when I heard knocking at my door. I got up to answer it, and to my surprise, it was the same blind man. Hello, Mr. York. I need to speak with you. I waved him in and sat at the kitchen table. Can I get you anything to drink? What's your name? He smiled. My name is Lucy, and yes, do you have a Coke? I blinked a few times. Alright, Lucy, coming right up. I brought 2 cans of Coke, slid him his across my table. So, what was that thing and what do you want from me? He takes a deep sip of his drink and lets out a sigh. Oh, Alex, we know who you are and what you are. Haven't you felt like you've done this all before? It's time to give up on resisting, Alex. We need you. I looked at him puzzled and asked, What do you mean? He stood up and placed his glasses on the table. His eyes were pitch black. Light didn't even shine in them. It was all empty, like an endless void. What's wrong with your eyes? He chuckled lightly. Oh, don't worry, child. Join my cause and we shall return your brother. I started to sweat. My heart was racing faster than my mind. Who and what is this man? It was then that he reached out and grabbed my hand. I was unable to move as I saw the future. Life and death, the start of the universe, and the decay of it all flooded my mind. I felt I was everywhere at the same time. He suddenly let go and all the vision stopped. Do you understand now, child? We were destined to take over the heavens. You were meant for greater things. I can't believe it so, I asked. This is all too much right now. Can we do this later? He shook his head. You have until midnight or all of this will come full circle. I looked at him and he let out a long sigh. Fine, I need to do something first. He just got up and walked out of the door. It looked like he understood. So, here I am now. I know it's a lot to unpack, but I can't shake this feeling of deja vu. Right now, I'm in my apartment on the 3rd floor and I can't go outside. I'm lucky that I've just bought my groceries yesterday. I don't know who could have done that, but at this time, I know a few other things. I know that it was someone from the tenant since the seams in the door indicate that they were welded shut from the inside. I know that one of my neighbor's friends from the next entrance confirmed that their door was welded shut as well, which tells me that they are still in here with us. I know that we don't know who it is. Nobody has taken the blame so far. And I know that there's a dead body outside. But don't let me get too ahead of myself. I'll explain everything in a minute. I live in a small and very old apartment complex on the far outskirts of a small town. Honestly, calling it an apartment complex is a stretch. It's only 5 stories high, no elevator, and it was built out of concrete panels all the way back in the 60s. It has no attic, so people who live on the last floor have to constantly worry about rain ruining their ceilings. Extremely sound conducive for their thickness of walls, so you never feel home alone. And a basement which connects to a sewer system, which smells horribly in the spring. In Russia, these kinds of buildings are called Khrushchevka, named after Khrushchev, obviously. I get the appeal of a low-cost, easy-to-construct building, but I think there's not a single soul in the entire country who would miss them. In 50 years, they should have demolished them and replaced them with something better, something newer. At this point, the buildings are a health hazard. Usually only the older people live there, since it was the house they had received long ago and they never moved out. Young people like me rarely moved into Khrushchevkas, which is why my neighbors were mostly old people. And let me tell you, old people in Russia are pretty mean. But I can't complain. I got this apartment from my late grandma, so at a young age, I at least had my own place. Plus the view from my balcony on the 3rd floor is great. It overlooks the forest, which technically is the border of our town, so no ugly buildings in sight. Just a boundless nature which, as I was told, stretches for thousands of kilometers in that direction. An entire ocean of dark wood that curves beyond the horizon. In a way, I live on a beach. It's pretty sweet if you don't account for the things that sometimes wash ashore. At first, I was kind of bewildered. I went down the stairs to the 1st floor, yawning and stretching and hoping for a weekend to come faster, and I saw a crowd of people, all in their coats, with their bags in their hands. The air was hot and damp from their collective breathing, and the air was quaking from their shouting. I couldn't make out what they were saying, because they were all talking at the same time, but I could get the general mood. Some of them were confused, but mostly they were outraged. I didn't understand what was going on at first. It was 8 in the morning when everyone was either hurrying to their jobs or God knows where the pensioners go so early. But then I made it to the front of the crowd and my eyebrows shot up. In front of me, a couple of men in their 40s were trying their hardest to push the door open, only they couldn't. The entire frame of the iron door was welded shut. I could see the metallic seam running along the frame. "Push harder, I have a doctor's appointment in an hour," one of the old women shouted at them. "It's no use." One of the men stood back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The seam had already cooled down. "Nothing short of a circular saw will open this door now." "We're locked in here?" one of the women asked in a tone that was bordering on hysterical. "I can't stay here, I need to get to work." "Everybody needs to get to work." The man snapped back at her. "But the door is locked. What else do you want me to do?" "So what? We're going to stay here locked because of some kid's prank." She squealed at a frequency I thought was impossible for a human voice to produce. "I doubt that it was a prank," the man said. "I've worked as a welder for 17 years, so I can tell you for sure. The door was welded shut from the inside." There was a pause of silence as everyone considered the meaning of his words. Somebody had locked themselves in with the rest of the tenants. But why? Who the hell would do something like that? I asked aloud to no one in particular. "Some maniac for sure," the old woman grunted. She gave me a mean eye and then tugged my sleeve. "Say, what apartment are you from? I don't recall seeing you here. Is that you who's done that?" She pointed at the door. "You and your good-for-nothing friends, huh? Probably open to butcher us all and take our money, right?" She was getting louder with each sentence, and I suddenly found myself at the center of attention of a really mean and annoyed crowd. I had to defuse the situation fast, or else I wouldn't be able to reach my apartment in one piece. "I'm Tamara Vasilvina's grandson," I explained, feeling angry that my words, the God-honest truth, sounded like an excuse in that context. "I've lived here for the past year, and I just came down from my apartment." "Leave him be, you old hag," one of the men from the back of the crowd interfered. "I've seen this lad here many times. He's good people. Helped me with my bags more than once." The woman was obviously humiliated by such a development and gave me a death glare, but thankfully she didn't say anything else. A doorbell buzzed behind me. Someone from the crowd was trying to reach the neighbors that lived on the first floor. "Open up," I heard a man's voice shouting, followed by the thuds of his fist knocking on the door. "The door's stuck and I need to get to work." "How are they going to help you?" someone from the crowd asked. "I'll crawl out through the window, that's how," the man replied. "Don't be ridiculous. All the windows on the first floor are grated," somebody else shouted. But the man didn't listen. It seemed that more people joined him as I could hear numerous fists banging on the door. "Hello, can you help me with the door? I can't seem to open it." We suddenly heard a voice coming from outside, from beneath the welded door. Somebody was caught outside when the door was welded shut. I can't find any explanation as to why they were trying to enter our building at such an early hour. Perhaps they were out for groceries, or they decided to take a morning jog. Perhaps it was a postman. It doesn't matter now. The people started talking all at the same time, trying to explain their situation to the man, or to ask him to call for help, or to demand him to explain himself. But he never had a chance to answer their questions. "My God, what is it?" he screamed in terror. The door shook as he started pulling on the door handle, hoping to pry the door open. The crowd fell silent. The terror in the man's voice was so genuine that no one had any doubts that he indeed saw something horrifying. "Let me in, please," he screamed again, desperately hoping to muster the strength to open the door. We couldn't see, of course, what scared him so much, but we could hear it. The heavy snarling, the clanking teeth of a huge maw, the claws scratching against the ground, getting louder with each second. The concern for his fate swept over us at the same time. It was probably what our ancestors had felt when they watched one of their own being chased by a lion. "Run! Run while you still can!" the crowd shouted, but it was already too late. There was a loud thud and the door shook. The unknown creature rammed straight into the man, pressing him into the door with its massive frame. I could hear it growling as it was tearing into him, trying to get a better hold of him, but I couldn't recognize the animal. The door trembled again and again, as the creature was throwing the man against it, hoping to get him to stop resisting. He screamed until the creature finally got to his throat. Someone gasped in terror. "Help him, someone!" Somebody from the back of the crowd shouted. Nobody moved. There was nothing that we could do. The iron door that protected us from the creature outside was also separating us from the man. He was so close to us, and yet he was dying alone. There was another strike at the door, and the crowd stepped back. The creature was testing the metal. It could hear us inside, but the door stood still. Whoever had welded it shut did a good job. After that, it fell silent. We didn't know whether it left or if it was standing right behind the door, biding its time. We couldn't check either way. It was at that moment that we heard them. The sirens, old and rusty. They were coming back to life after decades of sleep to fulfill their purpose, to warn people of an incoming catastrophe. The years of slumber did not do them any good. They started out sounding low, but with each second, as their mechanical voice cords were stretching and warming up, they were getting louder and higher, until the familiar sound that everybody had hoped to never hear was drowning out everything else. The sirens were getting louder. but in the pauses between the pulses, I could hear that the noise of the town outside was getting quieter. After a few minutes, the commotion outside was gone as everyone evacuated. We were left alone, probably the only people in the entire district. Alone, stranded, with something dangerous roaming beneath our windows. I can hear howls and screams in the distance. Its voice sounds almost human, but I now know the difference. You could tell it clearly when its howl was followed by a human scream. Now you might think that there is panic among the tenants, but you would be wrong. A distinctive feature of Russian people is that they, more than anyone else in the world, just don't care. I say this with absolute certainty. Once they learn that the police told them to stay put, they just calm down. I can sort of see their reasoning. Why panic when you're protected by the walls? Can't you stay at home for a few days? The police told us that it's dangerous outside, so why would you go there? I've lived through the 90s, you wet-eared mutt. You think this is going to scare me? So while everyone was displeased, they decided to stay put. And well, if they don't want to go, then I don't have much of a choice either. I'd rather stay in our fort with the majority of people, even if they aren't the most pleasant company, than risk going out. Besides, it's not like there's any immediate threat to my life, right? I'm still here, still alive, so that's good. Still locked in, and I'm starting to doubt whether I'm as protected as I thought I am. Today was the day when we were planning to try to leave this place, but with everything that had happened, I don't think we'll be leaving anytime soon. The water and electricity are still working, which is surprising. It might be that not the whole town has been evacuated, or that there's some skeleton crew left to take care of the necessities. Just to be prepared for everything, I filled the bathtub with water, in case it stops running or something happens to the pipes. I'm also eating only perishable goods for now. The rest can wait. I guess that I'll clear out the refrigerator first and switch to grains and potatoes afterward. The phones aren't working anymore, and neither is the internet without the VPN. I guess it would be smarter to turn it off completely, but someone at the local ISP's office is either not very smart, or has left this window of opportunity for people like me. On the day that it all started, everyone in the building had been trying to contact the police. I remember on the first day that you could hear them all through the walls, cursing that they didn't pick up the phone, or begging to come help us when someone did pick up. At first, the policemen were seemingly shocked that when they learned that we were still here, but they told us how it was. Nobody was coming to rescue us. It would all be over very soon. We just had to stay put. When people started calling their relatives, the phones were suddenly switched off, and had stayed silent since then. So I guess the higher-ups didn't want us to spread panic. Perhaps the rest of the country is not even aware of what's going on here. I'm not surprised. Our leaders have a long history of keeping the catastrophes under wraps. The beast has been very active on the first day. Though I hadn't seen it, I had heard later from the rumors that one of the tenants had seen it lurking beneath his windows. We would occasionally hear its roars and screeches, and every time I could hear the entire building fall silent to hone in on its sounds and determine how far away it is. We couldn't hear it on Saturday. Only a few car alarms had been set off, implying that something still lurks there. And on Sunday, for now, let's just say that we didn't see him during the day. All of this had led people to believe that this whole thing was going to be over soon. Although on the first day, everyone was staying in their apartments, on the second day, people started going out. People were walking up and down on the stairwell, talking to each other, and even inviting their neighbors in for a dinner. I had never seen these people getting so social. Usually, they just give you a death stare. I could hear the clanking of plates and cups, whistling of kettles, and chitter of the tenants as they were gathering into groups. I can understand them. Even the soldiers on the front lines of World War II had reported how unbearable the boredom was when nothing was happening. Plus, it's been instilled into us to stick together in times of hardship by the very nature. So realizing that it wasn't a good idea to spend my days alone, I decided to pay a visit to the only friend that I had within these walls, Nikita, who lived on the 5th floor. We had been buddies since the day that I moved in. He noticed me when I was entering my apartment and he invited me in for some tea. He was a swell guy around my age and was a casual tabletop gamer. We had spent many evenings playing Monopoly and Jackal in the past with him and his girlfriend. It was her who opened the door, and I instantly recognized from her look on her face that something was very wrong. Nikita was staying at his friend's home the night before it all started, Natasha explained. He was supposed to come home in the morning. We took a day off for Friday, and we were supposed to go out of town, but he didn't make it in time. She didn't cry, though looking at her eyes I realized that she already had for many hours. I could tell that she could use my support, so I invited myself in. Over a cup of tea, she shared with me that she was feeling scared for him. She was afraid that he was close to the building when the siren started wailing, and that she had nightmares where black hands were dragging him into darkness. She shared with me that she had heard that someone couldn't get in on Friday morning, and that she was afraid that it was him, so I reassured her that it wasn't the case. As I was there, I had heard the victim's voice and I would be able to tell if it was Nikita. That brought her some relief, but still she was stressed. I can't sleep very well since then, she told me. I wake up in the night hearing footsteps above. I keep hoping that it's him, but I know that it's not the case. On my way back from Natasha, I met the man who had claimed that he was a professional welder. He was carrying a box of tea to his neighbors. Curiosity got the best of me, so I struck up a conversation with him, hoping to learn if something about those welds could tell him something about the water. It's all over the place, he informed me. The welds are mostly fine, so I can tell that whoever did that knew what he was doing. But they are really messed up on other spots, especially at the corners, and there is a lot of slug left. Whoever did it was probably in a hurry and drunk. His hands seemed to be trembling. I can't stop thinking about it. The perpetrator is somewhere in this building, I know it. There are 4 separate flights of stairs, 5 floors. 4 apartments are each floor grouped around a stairwell, so 80 apartments in total. If I went by elimination, I would be able to find him eventually. It's not like I have anything better to do at the moment. I've spent a good hour examining the door, trying to spot some clues. All I've found is a cigarette butt that may not even belong to him. A Russian brand, Soyuz Apollo. It's really nasty stuff. Makes you cough your lungs out. I might take a look at the paint cans mounted on each flight of stairs, the improvised ashtrays. Maybe I'll find something this way. Some people just don't have the luxury to kick back and pursue some personal quest like I do. They generally need to get out. An old man in his early 60s knocked on my door. He was looking for insulin. He had been planning to get it from the nearby drugstore on the morning that we were all locked in. During the last few days, he had used up his last reserves and now desperately needed more. He had said that he had hoped that it would all be over before that would happen, but time was playing against him, and now he had no choice but to ask people to share their own if they had any. I didn't, but wondered if any other tenants had, but were choosing to hide that in fact in order to save some for themselves. When I noted that I hadn't seen his face before, he informed me that he was from the next flight of stairs. He had to get up onto the roof to come over here when all of his neighbors told him that they didn't have any insulin on them. I had heard that there had been shortages of insulin in the drugstores lately, which was probably why the old man didn't have enough stock on him. The drugstore is just across the road from our building, he complained to me. I can see it from my window. They were supposed to bring in a new batch on Friday morning, but when I came downstairs, the door had already been welded shut. His last sentence intrigued me, so I asked how early that he tried to leave the building. It was 6 a.m., son, he informed me. The pharmacist told me that the truck with insulin was going to arrive at 9 a.m., but I thought that I might get in the line early to make sure that I get enough. This has left me very heartbroken, but it also gave me a clue. The perpetrator must have finished what he was doing before his 6 a.m., and if that old man in need of insulin was able to get up onto the roof, surely the mysterious perpetrator could do the same. That would allow him to weld all of the doors shut from within. Perhaps it was even him who was waking up Natasha at night, or maybe someone else. I didn't want to jump to the most horrible conclusion right away. If something was crawling on the roof, it wouldn't miss its chance to go inside the building. Unless it's already here, hiding in one of the apartments. There were talks that we could make a break for it, make a rope out of bed sheets hanging from the window, and then get down from the second floor's window, one by one, and then head to the other side of town. We were acting like a group. Today was the day that we were going to set this plan into motion, but it didn't come to be. Last night, I woke from a sudden sound. When I opened my eyes, it was already over, but I knew what I had heard. The scream, the howl, similar to the one that the beast produced, only somewhat different. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, waiting for it to repeat, but there was only silence. I heard footsteps above. It seemed that I wasn't the only one who had been woken up by it. Getting up to my feet, I glanced at my phone. It was 3 a.m. I tried going back to sleep, but I couldn't keep my eyes closed. The howl, the implications of it were keeping me awake. Deciding that I'm not going to sleep anymore, I got up and I headed for the balcony. Oh, hey there. My neighbor Maxim startled me. His balcony was a few meters away from me, and he also decided to go out for a smoke. Even though it was a November night, he was wearing only his underpants. You heard that too. He pointed at the forest with his cigarette. I nodded. Yeah, you think it's back? It didn't sound like it. Maxim confirmed my suspicions. It sounded different, you know, like a different breed or something. Yeah, I thought so too. You mind passing me one? I asked Maxim, and he threw me the entire pack. Take it, you might need all of them. Before taking a cigarette, I glanced at the pack. Soyuz Apollo. My curiosity spiked, but I quenched it. I didn't want to think about that at the moment. We smoked in silence for some time, and then Maxim spoke again. Everything's in chaos in this building. Everyone is scared. We ought to do something about it. Like what? I wondered. I don't know yet. Maxim shook his shoulders. But it's our responsibility as men, you get me? We have to. He fell silent as a branch broke somewhere below. Something was moving down there. I only looked in time to see something big entering the forest, and my blood ran cold. It was standing there throughout all of our conversations, and neither me nor Maxim had noticed it. We were merrily chatting as the beast below was biding its time, listening to our voices. Holy, have you seen it? Maxim loudly whispered. I didn't, I stuttered, still shocked that the creature we had been hiding from for the last few days, the one that had crushed a man's windpipe with its jaws, was a mere meters away from me. Hold on, I'll light it up. I searched my pockets for a phone, pulled it out, turned on the flashlight and pointed it at the forest. At the very next moment, I shuddered and dropped it, catching it at the very last moment. I was not ready to see something like that. The phone's flashlight was not particularly powerful, so the cone of light quickly dissipated. And yet some of the photons had found their way between the branches deep into the forest to reflect from the beast's lone giant eye, the size of a small platter, and travel back to me. At that short moment, I was unwillingly participating in a staring contest with it. Something told me that I was the first man to do so and to walk away to tell about it. So now we know that it never left. It was always there, biding its time. It's not leaving, and neither are we. People are back to their apartments, and the stairwell is almost empty. On my way to Natasha, some old woman opened her door to give me a death stare. "Why the heck are you stalking around here? Everybody is tense as it is. They don't need you creeping around here making noise." Today Maxim knocked on my door. He told me that all of the able men were organizing into militia, and they offered me to join him. I decided that it was best to agree. If all able men were grouping up, I would be wise to stick with them, even if it could mean that I would be the building's first line of defense. Plus, I'll be able to keep my eyes on Maxim. The beast has become more stealthy. We don't hear its roars anymore. But sometimes, after spending hours looking out the windows, I can see it lurking behind the branches in the forest. I'm convinced that it came from the forest now. It feels like at home there, spending the majority of its time there, surfacing only to take a glance at us, to check if we're still there. My fridge is already empty. Even with me rationing the food, it ran out much quicker than I had expected. Luckily, I still have my grains and potatoes. Most of the old people don't seem to be complaining. I can understand why. With them surviving on their pension, they had learned to stretch the food until the next month. Plus, they are old and their knees are weak and brittle. They can't afford to go out for groceries every day, so they wait until they learn about some sale somewhere, and then they go there to stock up for a month, even if said sale is on the other side of the town. They're probably stocked up for a few months ahead. I can't stop thinking about it. The tap water is starting to taste funny too. I'm glad I filled my bathtub to be ready for something like that. Some people are warning everyone not to drink it, and I hear all kinds of rumors as to why we shouldn't. From it having some drugs mixed into it, and to it being poisonous to take care of everyone. Personally, I don't think it's anything like that. The pipes had already gone bad over the last week since they weren't looked after. Maxim had started organizing the militia. So far, it's very small, and we patrol only our flight of stairs and the roof. But he had started to try and convince people from the neighboring ones to join us as well. He sounds very convincing, and I can see why people are joining him. It gives them back the illusion of control. Even though we don't have anything except for some makeshift weapons, like sharpened brooms, knives, or in my case, a hatchet for meat, people are now less scared to leave their apartments again. They trust us. I guess it reminds them of the old times when volunteer militias on the streets that looked after the neighborhood were a common thing. However, not everyone is willing to join his cause. The furthest flight of stairs to the right gave us a rather cold shoulder when we descended from the roof to tell them about our idea. We were greeted by a bunch of men. Some of them were obviously drunkards, with their faces red and swollen from constant drinking, while the others had prison tattoos on them. All of them reeked of alcohol, and the sounds of Blotniak, a Russian music genre that consisted mostly of obscene ballads about criminal life, played in the background. Somewhere far in the distance, I had heard metal clanking. I didn't pay much attention to it then. Their leader, a man with gold teeth and a naked torso exposing a tattoo of an Orthodox church, spat to the ground when he heard us out. "Trying to play coppers here," he said with a fake grin, making sure to show us every tooth. "Look at that one, guys," he pointed at me. So young and already trash. The crowd behind him half-heartedly laughed. I felt a chill running down my spine. The look in their eyes was dangerous. It was like staring into the eye of the beast again. "It's for the greater good," Maxim said, staring at the man. "We're all in danger and we need to stick together." "We can look after ourselves," the man replied, pulling a gun from behind his belt. "For a moment. And we don't need anyone snooping around here either. Now scram back to your corner." I felt Maxim's hand on my shoulder. He was tugging at me, letting me know that it was time to go. I felt sick that the man could talk to us like that and get away with it, but there was nothing I could do. "Hey, bring some girls next time," one of the men shouted as we were leaving, and the crowd laughed. "Well," Maxim said on our way back, "it seems like we have a hottie here." And when he met my confused gaze, he explained, "It's the place where the criminals gather after they have served their sentence to celebrate. It seems like a bunch of them got caught up in here with us, and they don't seem like it affected them. They seem to just be partying all day long, which means soon they'll be out of food. I don't envy their neighbors." Maxim is a nice guy. I'm still not sure if he's the mysterious Walter who had locked us all in. The only clue I have is the brand of cigarettes that he gave me, and it's a stretch to think that he's the only one in the entire building who smokes them. While they are not exactly common, I'd seen people smoke them plenty of times. I tried talking to him about what he thinks about the identity of the Walter. Who could it be and why did he do that? And while he was talking, I was looking at his face to spot something. If he were to get nervous, then it would be a dead giveaway. But his face remained straight the entire time, and he even got some joy out of speculating about who it could be and what their motives were. Either he was a very good liar, or it just wasn't him. After that, Maxim had me check the basement to see whether we could escape through the sewers, or if something could find its way through them. Truth be told, I was scared to go down there. The concrete walls covered in moss and cobwebs stretching from wall to wall weren't exactly reassuring. But what really scared me were the tiny windows along the walls. They were too small to crawl through. I would barely be able to fit my head in if I tried, but I was still afraid that something could find its way in. The basement ran under all of the building, with all flights having a door leading down there, so it was hard to find the hatch that led down to the sewers. When I finally found it in the corner of the basement, I experienced a mix of emotions. It was also welded shut, which meant that nothing could get in through it, but also that nothing could get out. Over the last few days, we had started hearing gunshots in the distance. It sounds like a machine gun, and I doubt anyone in our town has one. Maybe the police have a few AK-74s. Sometimes it almost sounds like there's a war going on in the distance. It fills me with hope that we're going to be rescued soon, but I can't help but wonder, what are they shooting at for so long? I doubted that the beast outside could soak in so much ammunition. Aside from that, not much happened during that time. One day followed another, and I spent the majority of my time with Natasha. We could both use some distraction from the world around us. I was at her apartment yesterday playing Monopoly, when we heard confused shouts coming from the outside. Looking out the window that was overlooking our town, I felt my heart skip a beat. Someone was running away from the house. I squinted my eyes and my heart sank even more. I recognized who that was. It was the old man who had been looking for insulin. I opened the window and looked down, already knowing what I was looking for. And sure enough, it was there. A rope made out of bedsheets, hanging from one of the windows on the second floor. In desperation, the man must have decided to make a break for it and rush towards the drugstore to get the insulin that he needed to survive. It was either that or a slow and painful death. He disappeared behind the crown of trees, and a few seconds later, I heard the glass break. He must have shattered the window of the drugstore to get inside. The sound echoed across the empty streets, and Natasha shuddered in fear. I knew what she was going through. If that creature that had stalked our house for the past week heard him, it would no doubt come over, seeking its next prey. A few minutes later, I saw him running towards the window, clutching something in his hand. Even from a distance, I could see how pale he was. He was out in the open, away from the safety of our walls. And for a moment, I felt respect for the man rise up in my chest. He defied his odds and refused to die doing nothing. He had approached the windows when we heard it. The moaning scream of the beast, somewhere very close. The man grabbed the rope and started climbing up. He made it about halfway when his weak arms gave out and he fell to the ground. Old and frail, he was unlikely to make it even if he wasn't malnourished and weakened by his disease. He slowly got up, rubbing his hip, and tried climbing up again, when the creature showed its head around the corner. I could finally see it with my own eyes. It was beyond my wildest expectations. It was clear that whatever it was not from this world. Its front legs were thick and burly, ending with paws with long fingers that looked disturbingly similar to human fingers. The hind legs were much shorter and, once again parodying human nature, looked very similar to human legs. All of its body was covered in black, long, thick fur except for its head, which was bald, exposing its gray skin. And in the center of its almost human-looking head, a single eye rotating wildly, seeking out its target. It stopped on the old man, and the beast let out a low growl. The man was not giving up, trying to crawl up, but with his busted hip, he could barely crawl 1 meter above the ground, and his arms alone could not pull him up. The beast must have noticed that because it didn't rush at him. Instead, it took its time approaching him as if taunting the man's efforts to escape it. When it was just 5 meters away, the man jumped back to the ground and tried to escape, but the creature covered the distance separating them in one quick leap. It raised its paw above him, clenching its fingers into a fist, and I looked away, but I still heard the wet splatter when its fist descended onto the man's head like a hammer, taking care of him instantly. At least he didn't suffer like the one before him. When I carefully looked out again, the creature and the man were gone. The only proof that they had been there was a long trail leading around the corner, towards the forest. I thought that the day was eventful enough, but last night, something else happened. I woke up from the sound that had haunted me for so long, that I wanted to know so much about. The sound of someone welding something. I jumped out of my bed and listened. I wasn't sure where the sound was coming from, but when I looked out of the window, I noticed a light coming from the roof above, somewhere from the direction where the criminals resided. I rushed out of my apartment just in time to see Maxim leave his own. He was wearing nothing but boxers, and I could see in his eyes that he was in a rush. Just like me, he wanted to learn the identity of a mysterious welder. When we got under the roof, the welder was already gone, but not before finishing what he had been doing. The door leading down to the criminals was now reinforced with a makeshift cage gate made out of stairs railings. At that moment, I realized that the sound I had heard before, the clanking of metal, was probably the welder working on the railings to give them the necessary shape. The mysterious welder that I had been chasing for the past week was one step ahead of me. I now knew where he lived, and I couldn't get there. And even if I did find my way in, I'd have to deal with the criminals first. They'd let me know before that I was not welcome there. The burning question, however, was not who he was. What bugged me the most was, why did he do it? What made him install the gate in the door leading to the roof? Perhaps there was something that we didn't know about. I thought that would be as far as the bad news went. But this morning, we found one of the tenants dead on the stairwell. There were no wounds on his body, but he was foaming at the mouth, and his skin had the nastiest shade of purple. I recognized his face. It was the man who on the first day had said that he had worked as a welder in the past. His grieving wife told us that he had no history of heart diseases, which led us to a single conclusion. He was poisoned. It seemed that the tap water indeed contains poison in it. Since then, we don't drink tap water anymore. I'm also convinced that they have left us electricity to lure all the creatures to us. They want our problem, namely, the problem of having too many witnesses to take care of itself. Spread the message, people. We're here, and we're still alive. There's something outside my door. Something's lurking at the stairwell, going up and down all 5 floors. I was alerted to its presence by a scream one late evening. Someone must have gone out for a smoke and to maybe socialize with his acquaintances when they saw it. There are no sounds of struggle, nor any yelps of pain, only terror. I'm now glad that nature instilled that need to cry out when you're faced with something horrifying, something so unexplainable, it rocks your understanding of the world around you. That way, you warn your pack about the danger. Even if you don't survive, the others learn to stay wary. Your death becomes a noble sacrifice, a meaningful event when you succumb to your terror in your last moments. And I barely managed to squeeze my own scream of terror in when I realized that the shriek the creature emitted was not the one that I had heard before. It was not the primal yell that had haunted us for the last week. This was something new. Something that somehow had managed to find its way into our apartment complex, despite the precautions that had been taken. I spent half an hour looking out the eye hole, trying to catch a glimpse of it. The dim light bulb outside provided just enough lighting to see what was going on. At one point, something suddenly obscured the light, and I heard a pitter-patter across my door. A second of confusion was followed by a terrifying realization, and I jumped back from the door, trying to hold back my scream of surprise and shock. Whatever it was, it just crawled across my door on its many legs. It could crawl on the walls. This means that the door on the roof is now a huge opening in our defenses. In the morning, me and the other guys from our militia carefully stepped out to take a look at the damages it had done. We had found a bloody spot on the 4th floor, and a long trail of it which led to the roof. There, it led towards the edge of the roof where it ended. The creature not just found its way inside our house, it took one of ours and then dragged him off to its nest. Since there are 2 creatures now, I feel I should start giving them the names, Ape Demon or the Ape. It sounds like a fitting description for the one that has been terrorizing us for the last few days. And on the next day, everyone unanimously started calling the newcomer the Crawler. So that's what we were going with now. So if the ape is the juggernaut that watches the streets, the Crawler is the infiltrator that sneaks in and attacks us where we live. A demon ape and the Crawler. God, just 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have thought that those are the words that I would use with a serious face. Since that event, we put a lock on the door that leads to the roof. I think it was long overdue. It's just, we never thought that we would need to do that. I pray that it will suffice to keep it out, and I make sure to have my curtains closed at all times. I'd hate to one day look outside and see that thing crawl across my window, and I'd hate to see me inside, an easy prey ready for consumption. I'm more and more concerned with what our endgame is. There is no chance that the water in the pipes could have gone so bad in just over a week that it would become so toxic. Bacteria don't kill you in one night. They don't make you foam at your mouth. They don't make your skin turn purple. The water has some toxins in it now, which tells me that our government, we are no more than unwanted eyewitnesses. If we make it to the other part of town where the gunshots are heard, we won't be rescued. We will meet a firing squad. The food becomes a problem. Yesterday, I heard someone walking around, asking the neighbors if they have some salt. Just a cooking salt, to make their boring dish more pleasurable. I heard 3 of my neighbors tell them to get lost. But who am I to judge? When they rung my bell, I didn't open the door. Now, I know that it's just salt that they were looking for, but you can never be too careful. Perhaps it was their way of gauging the situation. Perhaps they think that if I have salt to spare, then I have plenty of other food inside, and that I'm a viable target. Perhaps I'm just talking nonsense. 2 days ago, I carefully checked the door in the basement that led to the flight of stairs where the bandits live. It was locked on a hanging lock, but neither I nor any of the tenants heard the welding, which means that, if anything, it could be broken down. I need to get to the welder. This personal quest of mine that started out of boredom and curiosity has grown into a necessity, and a prerequisite for my survival. They must know something. They are calling all the shots on where everybody goes, and what parts of the building that we have access to, and they might have the tools to get us all out of here. I've thought about it. My only chance of making it is getting a torch or a buzzsaw from him, whichever he happens to have. Cut the hatch that leads to the sewers open and escape through it. It's probably a maze down there, so if I make a wrong call on where to get out of it and come face to face with the military or the beast outside, I'm done for. But it's better than pushing my luck by trying to escape through the surface. The only problem is getting to him before the bandits he lives with get to us. The cage gate that he's installed on the roof entrance has latches on a lock, which means that it can be opened by them, which means that it is they who decide who enters their flight of stairs, which means that they pretty much have a fortress within the fortress. I fear that when those doors open, they'll come out not to cooperate, not to beg for food, but to hunt, to prey on the weak, and so far we have no solid way of fighting them back. But the crawler and the bandits aren't our only problems. Yesterday, the ape learned that it's strong enough to rip the cages out the windows on the first floor. Worse, it was the apartment in the same stairwell as mine that it chose to attack. I heard its grunts outside, the screams of terrified people downstairs, the weeping metal that was being torn apart. I don't know what the people downstairs did to provoke the beast. Perhaps they had thought that the cages would protect them, and they didn't have their curtains closed. Perhaps they saw the creature and decided to indulge themselves in a staring contest with it. I don't know, I didn't ask. One of the tenants who had lived there managed to escape. I could see the terror in her eyes when I walked out of my apartment to see what was going on, just in time to have her rush past me. But I knew that someone else was less lucky. I heard the screams of a man who the ape pinned down. I heard the loud thumps when its fist collided with the man's flesh. And you know that thing where you can tell where the sound is coming from by how much it is distorted by the echo? Well, judging by how it all sounded, I realized with terror that these screams were coming from that apartment on the first floor, and that the woman, fleeing in terror, didn't close the door on her way out, which meant that when the ape was done with the man downstairs, it would be free to enter the stairwell and roam all 5 floors. Perhaps it wouldn't even be able to leave if it got lost here. I had to do something quick. It was very risky to go down there and try to close the door, but I knew that if I didn't, that at that moment I would be dead within a few days. It wasn't bravery that pushed me to do such a reckless action. It was desperation. I was facing a paradox. Stay safe and die, or risk your life and live. And my body was telling me that I wanted to live some more. I carefully made my way down to the first floor, and I took a peek at the door. Just as I suspected, it was wide open. I could hear the ape munching on its already silent prey, but I could also see the key already in the keyhole. Carefully, trying my best not to make a noise, I inched towards the door. I wanted to scream in terror from the fact that my steps weren't completely soundless, but I guess the creature didn't hear it over the sound of the bones breaking under its bite. I was now right next to the door. One more step and I would be inside the apartment. The ape was now mere meters away from me, somewhere around the corner. If I messed up, I would have a second, maybe 2 to say my prayers. There was no going back now. Carefully, I slid the key out of its keyhole. On its way out, it clanged. The munching stopped. It took a step. I slammed the door shut and started shoving the key into the keyhole, but my trembling hands couldn't pull that off. A muffled roar came from within the apartment, and I felt a massive body slam into the door from the other side. Luckily, the door seemed to be reinforced. The ex-tenants had made sure to protect themselves from burglars, as with them living on the first floor, they were the prime targets. My legs were twitching from all the adrenaline in them, begging me to run away. I knew that if the creature somehow turned the door's handle, even by accident, it would break out that instant, leaving me no chances to survive. I took a pause, took a deep breath, and then slipped the key in. A moment later, I turned it, locking the door. The beast was now subdued. It left the apartment through the window a few hours later, after it was done raging and consuming the man. After that, all of the tenants who lived on the first floor moved in with their neighbors above. They brought their food supplies with them, and I'm glad to say that people upstairs didn't mind them. They realized that it would be heartless to let them live on the first floor, or hang out on the stairwell, where they were the easy prey. Natasha had an old man move in with her as well. But still, even though our casualties were minimal, we had taken a huge hit. Our home, our submarine submerged in all this madness, had taken another hit and sunk even deeper. I'm currently thinking about how to find the welder and get him out of here without alerting any thugs. The roof is not an option, but there's still a basement door that can be broken. I'll discuss that with Maxim tomorrow. It's time to act. Time to get out of here. It's really weird how everything is both extremely tense and dull here. My life is in constant danger and we don't have a solid plan yet. But I can't think about it all the time. As weird as it sounds. I'm tired of constantly thinking about my chances of survival. And when monsters are not crawling across your window, you don't have that sense of urgency. You don't get anything at all. It feels like you exist only to react to them, interact with them, and maybe eventually end up as their lunch. Over the past few days, I've received a lot of advice from Florida. You guys have it rough there. I still wish that I would rather be there though. At least it has colors. Everything here is so gray that I want to poke my eyes out. We prepared for food and water shortages, but there were things that we didn't consider. For starters, there are 2 dead bodies in our building. They're starting to rot. When the guy who got poisoned died, his widow kept his body in their apartment. She dressed him up in nice clothes and laid him down on their sofa. We even suspect that she spent some water to wash his body. But 2 days ago, she came to us asking for help. He was starting to swell up and smell. It was a weird sight, seeing him lying there in a tranquil pose, arms on his chest, on that tiny sofa under a painting of a river, yet so swollen and purple. It seemed that the toxin continued its work in him. The smell was unbearable. In the first few minutes that I've got there, it was making me want to vomit. And knowing that it was a human body, something that was a living individual just some time ago, was making it even more disturbing. She wanted us to take him to the basement, but Maxim objected. His smell will attract the predators. They'll want to break in even more if they smell his stench. We need to throw him outside or leave him on the roof. You can't, she whispered. Her eyes widened. It's not Christian-like. He deserves a burial. She leapt to her husband's carcass and raised her hands, letting everyone know that she won't let us take him. You can't, she repeated in a shrill voice. I won't let you. Get out of here. I won't let you do it to him. We silently surrounded her. Nobody wanted to force her away, but we knew that it had to be done. The man's dead body was compromising the safety of the living. Maxim wordlessly grabbed her by the wrist. She screamed and tried to break free, but Maxim wouldn't budge. When she realized that she couldn't overpower him, she had switched to defense, clawing at him with her free hand. Maxim didn't defend himself, choosing to stoically endure her assault, giving her the opportunity to take it all out on him, and only tilting his head back so that she couldn't claw his eyes out. "Take the body, throw it out the window," he said before dragging the woman to the kitchen so that she wouldn't get in her way. In a desperate, last-ditch attempt to resist, she grabbed onto the door, but Maxim yanked her away from it. Her grip was strong enough to leave scratches on the door's wooden surface, and one of her nails was left edged into it. We wrapped his body in a blanket. It was easier to carry him that way, both physically and mentally. We had carried him to the roof. One of us said some prayers and we tossed him over the edge. We didn't even look how he fell, only hearing the heavy thud when his body collided with the ground, and rushed to safety before the crawler showed up. Looking back, I don't feel guilty about what we did, but I feel guilty for not feeling guilty, if that makes sense. I should have felt something. A few hours later, when I looked out of the window, the body was already gone. The second body, the one of the man who got mauled in his apartment, was left where it was. We knew that the door to the apartment could off the intruders, so we didn't bother to do anything about it. I've talked to Maxim about the water and my plans to get to his tools. He liked my idea, but he warned me that there was nothing we could do at the moment. Sneaking in would be dangerous and we didn't know where to look. "It's dangerous to confront them," he told me. "They are armed and they can overreact to us entering their territory. Maybe we should just let them know about our plan. That way they will cooperate." I reluctantly agreed with them. Back then, we didn't know that the time for negotiation was already up, that those scumbags had already made up their mind. Because yesterday, when I walked up to the 5th floor to waste some time with Natasha, I found to my horror that the door to her apartment was wide open, and there were signs of struggle taking place in her hallway. I had suspected the worst, but also, I didn't abandon hope. I rushed through all of the rooms, but she was nowhere to be found. Only the old man from the 1st floor that she had taken in was lying on the floor of the guest room. A small pool of blood formed under his left side. He was still alive when I turned him over. He didn't answer my questions as to where Natasha was, instead just whispering, "I'm sorry, young man. It's all our fault. The sins of the fathers." I didn't have time to heed his cryptic words. I needed to help him or he would die from bleeding, but I knew that Natasha was in danger at that very moment, perhaps somewhere very close. I rushed back to the hallway, trying to find any clue as to where she could be, and sure enough, there were a few drops of blood on the floor, leading outside and towards the door to the roof. It was dangerous to enter the roof on my own, but I didn't care. I rushed outside, looking around. Nothing. Nothing but a small, barely noticeable trail of droplets. I feared that it would lead me to the edge of the roof, but instead, it was heading towards the cage door at the end of it, the one that led to the bandits' hideout. The cage was already locked. I started shaking it and screaming for them to let Natasha go. It's reckless of me, I know. If I had stayed there for a few more minutes, I'd had no doubt attract the crawler and be done with. But one of the bandits emerged from the darkness beyond the cage and shook his pistol at me. "Keep it civil. Your girlfriend is in good hands. We'll take care of her. After all, how does that saying go? If you love her, let her go. Ain't that right?" He gloated. I spat in his face. And when he lifted his gun, I turned around and ran away. I heard a few shots behind me, but luckily they had missed me, and the man must have decided not to spend more ammo on me. I had to act quick. I didn't even want to think about what they were going to do with her. Every minute counted. As I was running down the stairs, calling for men to gather up, hollering at the top of my lungs, surprisingly, people started leaving their apartments to see what was going on. They could hear the urgency in my voice and they didn't want to miss an important announcement. Never had I been so glad to see the faces of my neighbors before. Just 2 minutes later, I had told them what had happened. 2 women rushed to the 5th floor to help the old man. "Some militia you are," some old woman from the back row said. You can't even protect us in our homes." "Shove it," I yelled in her direction, and surprisingly, there were no witty retorts. "Hey kiddo, what's going on?" Maxim stepped through the crowd to see what was happening. I told him what was up. His eyes turned bloodshot, and his fist trembled with fury. That settles it," he hollered. "Men, gather up. We're going to take her back." He confidently hurried towards the roof. I followed, and I could see that other men, even those who were reluctant, followed after us. We headed straight to the door on the roof. The same door where just a few minutes before I had almost been shot. Only now, I wasn't alone. There were at least 10 men with me now. It didn't matter if we probably couldn't break through the gates. What mattered was that when 10 angry men show up at your doorstep, you listen to what they have to say. "Open up!" Maxim shouted through the cage grates. "Open up or I swear I'm going to break these down." "What's all the ruckus?" The same man who I had seen previously began to walk up to the cage. He cast me an angry gaze before looking away. While he looked confident, his earlier smugness was gone. "Give us back the girl, or we'll feed you to those monsters outside," Maxim hollered. The bandit raised his hands in a mocking gesture of fear. "Easy, Pops. We just took a girl for a night out. No harm in that, right?" Maxim kicked the cage in fury, and the man on the other side jumped in surprise. It was now clear that he was feeling tense and his calmness was just an act. "Now, if you think that we can't tear these down, you're very mistaken," Maxim shouted. "Calm down, Pops. I was just joking, okay? We could all use a bit of humor these days," the man said, doing his best to keep smiling. "I'll go look for her." He disappeared. I was getting more and more anxious. Who knew for how long she had been in there? Who knew what they had been doing to her? Every minute counted. We heard some arguing coming from within. The men were shouting at each other, but due to the echo, I couldn't make out what they were saying. Thankfully, I didn't hear Natasha's screams. The shouting subsided, and then a few minutes later, the man walked up to the cage separating us. I could see Natasha behind him. She had a nasty bruise under her eye, and dried up blood on her lip indicated that she must have been bleeding from her nose. Thankfully, her clothes were intact, with no signs of tear, and there was a strange spark in her eyes that seemed almost out of place. A spark of enthusiasm and determination. "Here's your girl," the man grunted, giving her a push towards us as she was passing him. "We didn't do much to her, see? Now scram." "And her food?" Maxim inquired. "What are you talking about? It was a down payment for keeping her safe with us," was the man's reply, and he closed the gate and walked away. Maxim grunted, and I could see the fury in his eyes. To him, it wasn't over. He wasn't going to let it slide. Something unknown in the distance roared. We hurried back to safety. "How are they? Did they?" I asked Natasha once we were inside the building, but she raised her hand to stop me. "I'm fine, don't worry about it. Their leader got scared when he saw that jerk bring me to them. He suspected something like this would happen." "How did they get you?" I asked her another question, but she shook her head. "They lured me out, pretended to be one of the tenants from the next flight of stairs, told me that they were looking for some aspirin. It doesn't matter." She lowered her voice to a whisper. "I found him. I found the welder." "You did?" I was genuinely surprised at such a development. "Yes, he lives on the 3rd floor, apartment 73. They told me to go hang out with him while they were deciding what to do with me. It seems like they're taking good care of him in return for his help. I don't know what's happened to the other tenants though. He doesn't want to talk about them." "So did you talk to him? Did he tell you why he did it? Why did he weld us in here?" I asked with anticipation. "Yes." She looked around to see if anyone could hear us. The men were still descending from the roof and going straight inside her apartment to help with the old man who was still tended to inside. "He says that he panicked. He was hunting in the forest for some game when he saw them. He says that there are dozens, maybe hundreds of them. They are migrating somewhere, and we are on the sidewalk of their path. So he ran home and barricaded himself and all of us. Of course, that was before he had learned about the bandits. Said they had moved in just 2 nights before. But why didn't he run away? I wondered. Why not evacuate? Natasha shook her head. He can't. He has a son and he is completely bedridden, paralyzed below the waist, and he's too weak to carry him. No elevators too. She grunted and shook her head. He thought that it would all be over in a day or two, but he miscalculated. I imagined the situation the man had found himself in, trapping not only himself but his helpless child and everyone else in this hell. Even though I wanted to feel angry at him, I just couldn't. I told him about your plan. Natasha interrupted my train of thought. He says that it makes sense and he's willing to lend his tools and skills if we find a way to sneak him and his son out. They guard him well. There are constant patrols on the 4th and 2nd floor. Of course, they mostly drink and listen to music, but they have guns. I wanted to say something, but then Maxim approached Natasha and put a hand on her shoulder. You alright, girl? Yeah, I'm fine, Natasha said, leaning back. She didn't like the fire in Maxim's eyes. Good, good, he said, staring into the distance. I have a daughter, you know, younger than you, but still. He gave Natasha's shoulder another shake. They will never do this to you again, girl, he proclaimed, and I could almost hear the lava of pure anger building in his throat. Or anyone else for that matter. I made a decision. We need to strike them first. If you have pests, you gotta smoke them out. He looked Natasha in the face and the sight of her wounds made him grit his teeth. Tomorrow, we'll burn their entire stairwell down. Right now, I barely have enough strength to write, and my memories of the events that transpired a week ago are still fuzzy. But let's just say one thing. I'm still here, still inside this cursed building, weaker than ever. Maxim wasn't joking that he was going to burn down the entire stairwell. I and some others tried to convince him not to do it. We reminded him that we would catch on fire as well, that there were at least 2 innocent people in there, one of whom was a young man who wouldn't be able to escape, but none of it mattered to him. We just have to start a fire big enough to make them move towards the roof, he said, maniacally nodding at his own words. We'll be waiting for them there, and once they emerge, he made a slashing motion with his hand. After that, we can put the fire out. You'll try to, I reminded him. Fire's no joke. Who knows how big it may grow? Well, we'll do our best, he reassured me in an impatient tone, but I wasn't going to let it slide. And what about the welder and his son? I reminded him. They are just prisoners there, and they won't be able to escape the fire or the smoke. Are you ready to burn them down? I looked him in the eye, trying to guilt him into abandoning his idea. But Maxim didn't look away. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye, and I could see that the flames of his anger were getting wilder. How can you be so sure that they are just prisoners in there? Because they said so. Why did they make such a convenient cage door for them, huh? Why did they lock us in here? Because his son... I tried to explain, but Maxim stopped me before I could finish. No, that's just what he says, and personally, I think he's full of BS. He didn't have to lock us all in here, alright? He could have just stayed in his apartment and be done with it. So unless you have a better plan, we're going to do it my way, he said before turning around to leave. I do actually, I said to his back. He turned around and nodded for me to continue talking. My plan was crazy and dangerous, potentially even more so than the one Maxim offered, and way more complicated. But in my plan, the threat could be contained, while Maxim was basically offering to burn us all down. So after listening to what I had to offer, he agreed to go with it. At least we can still burn it all down if your plan goes wrong, he grunted. You start tonight. I'll find you a few men who can assist you. If your plan doesn't work by sunrise, we go with mine. I was too anxious to stay alone, so I decided to spend the rest of the day at Natasha's place. Her apartment was crowded. A few women were helping her tend to the old man. He was breathing heavily, and his face was very pale, but his bleeding had stopped and he was conscious again. "Young man, thank you," he said, wincing from pain at the same time. It was obvious that talking was causing him quite a lot of pain. "I didn't do anything," I said, and frankly, that was the truth. The old man was just too confused to realize what had happened, that I had abandoned him and went after Natasha, not even bothering to call for help. But he just smiled at me. "So modest. Lay still and don't waste your strength," one of the women told him. "You're too weak for that." He didn't pay her words any attention. "I'm sorry, young man," he whispered weakly. "And to you all, I'm sorry as well. It was our hubris to expect anything else." "He's delusional. Don't mind his words," one of the older ladies warned me and Natasha. "For the first time in my life, I'm quite sane, thank you," the man denied with some degree of irritation before wincing from pain. "Listen," he talked to me again. "There's no forgiving us for what we've done. It was a difficult time. The entire world was our enemy, but still, we thought that we had failed. But we were thinking globally. We were only thinking about them as if they were weapons aimed at the enemy. We never thought they would be so effective against the civilians, against our own people if they ever broke out. We underestimated them. We thought they were already gone." "Quit your old ramblings, you old fool. And you two, go," the old woman told me and Natasha. "Can't you see you're agitating him? We need him to rest." "This is my apartment," Natasha objected, but the woman just scowled. "You'll be back here tomorrow. Go hang out at your boyfriend's place." She nodded at me. "He's not my..." "Okay," Natasha gave in, seeing that there was no use arguing. I nodded towards the door. She nodded back and we headed out. "Heed my words, there will be more. You need to get out of here while you still can, or they'll trample you along with everyone else." The last words of the old man sounded like an ominous warning. It was in the deep of night when we started executing my plan. The first thing we needed was the lure. It was tough finding a piece of meat nobody wanted to share, and when they heard why we needed it, they would spin a finger at their temple to show us what they thought about our idea. But after a few hours of searching, we finally found what we were looking for, and then it was time for the next part of the plan. We brought it to the basement with us and headed towards the furthest door, the one that led to the stairwell Maxwell wanted to burn down so much. The door must have been locked on the hanging lock from the other side, but it was old and wooden. There was a way to get past it. The trick was to do it completely silently. We spent a good 3 hours trying to drill through the wood with a wimble we had borrowed from an old carpenter, making one crank at a time, listening all the while to the noises on the other side. In the complete silence, we could hear the thugs who were on Overwatch drinking and talking, and the nauseating hoarse voice of chants and singing they were listening to still rings in my ears. But at any moment, the music could stop and their tone could change from cheerful to worried, which would mean only one thing: we were busted. Throughout our operation, I could think about one thing only. Our failure meant the death of the welder. Even if we would miraculously retrieve his tools from the ashes, that price was too high to pay. After 2 hours, the wimble's drill finally reached the nail which held the lock hinge in place, and we spent the next hour working around it, taking turns, trying to make the hole bigger, until finally the nail was separated from the wood. The hanging lock was just hanging from the doorframe now, and the door could be opened. I took off my boots and I entered the stairwell. From then on, I was on my own. It only made sense for me to be the one to bear all the risks. After all, this was my plan. The men were just one floor above me. I could now hear them with perfect clarity. One wrong step, one noise, and they come rushing down towards me. It was time for the greatest gamble of my life. I reached out towards one of the doors. Unlocked, of course. Why would they lock it if they left it? They knew that the first floor was dangerous, that the ape could break down the grates on their windows. And so did I. I headed towards the kitchen, opened the window and put the piece of meat on the floor. And then carefully taking a knife out of the drawer, I slit my left palm and drew some blood, raining a few drops onto the piece of meat. The plan was now set in motion. I didn't know how well the ape could smell, but I banked on the fact that by sunrise, it would be tempted enough to break down the grates and enter the stairwell, where it would quickly deal with all the bandits. I hoped that the old water would have enough sense to lock the doors before that happened. Looking over my trap one last time, I headed toward the exit. I made sure to leave the door open. That way, either the creature would find its way out of the apartment on its own, or the bandits would hear it breaking in, which would prompt them to come over and take a look at what was going on and drawing it out. I headed towards the basement door, only to find it wide open. The hammer, nails, and pieces of furniture, improvised wooden planks that we planned to use to barricade the door afterward, were lying right next to it, abandoned. Weird, I thought to myself before I heard it. The pitter-patter of many legs that was getting closer with each second, coming straight out of the basement that I came from. The windows was all I could think before I turned around and ran. The windows, the tiny windows that had lined the walls of the basement, were an easy way for the crawler to get in. We had never seen it, so we had no clue whether it would be able to sneak in. And now it was in there, cutting me off from safety and pitting me between a rock and a hard place. And it was approaching fast. I didn't have a lot of time to spare. I had two options: run back into the apartment that I just left, where the bait was waiting for the ape, or run up the stairs towards the bandits and hope that their shooting skills weren't great. I chose the second option. In a crisis, the primates had always thought to gain elevated position or move towards their peers, and that instinct, buried deep within my psyche, re-emerged in the time of need. The men were so drunk and so bewildered by my sudden appearance that none of them had even reached for their gun. They just watched me with surprised eyes as I rushed past them towards the third floor, toward the apartment 73. "Open up!" I shouted as I started furiously banging on the door. "I'm Natasha's friend, open up!" One floor below me, the man screamed in terror. One of the screams was cut short as a pair of muddy jaws, maybe mandibles, crushed the man's throat. A second later, I heard gunshots. The men above, the ones who guarded the fourth floor, started rushing down to see what was going on. I could hear their hurried steps. In a second, they would turn around the corner and see me, trying to break into their most important prisoner's apartment. The key clanked and the door suddenly bulged. I jumped to the side to let it open, and saw the old man inside, wrinkly face, wide eyes. "Hey, who the heck are you?" I heard right behind me. They were just one flight of stairs away. I pushed the old man aside. I jumped inside his apartment, locking the door behind me, and listened. They had rushed past the door. There were more pressing matters to take care of, one floor below. "I'm Natasha's friend. I've come here to rescue you. Grab your metal saw or a gas torch or whatever it is that you have and let's go," I quickly said. "But He tried to interrupt me, but I stopped him with a gesture. "I'll carry your son, don't worry about it." "I don't have a gas torch anymore," he said. I shook my head. I couldn't have heard it right. "What?" I asked him. "I'm out of gas. I used it all up cutting the railings for the cage on the roof," he explained. "So, you don't have anything to cut through metal?" I inquired. It seemed impossible. No, that couldn't be right." He shook his shoulders. "I'm afraid not." "But you told Natasha that you have the tools." I roared at him. "I do, but they're useless. I just wanted to save my son," he explained, pointing towards the door to the other room. "I just wanted someone to carry him out of here." He didn't have the tools. My quest for him was pointless. I slid down the door and I grabbed my head. I spent a few minutes like that, listening to the noises outside. The men rushed back to the 4th floor, shooting at their pursuer, and after a few minutes, the sounds of a fight and struggle above stopped. I had to get out. I had no reason to stay here any longer. Should any of the bandits survive, they would come over to see who I was. I opened the door. "Wait, you're leaving? But I can't carry him without you," the old man pleaded. "Please, I walked out and I closed the door behind him. I moved back to the basement carefully, yet at the same time, I couldn't feel any more fear. It all seemed pointless at that moment. 2 weeks I had harbored hope that I would be able to get out through the sewers, and now all hope was lost. The 2nd floor had 2 corpses on it, one of them still clutching a pistol. I wasn't thinking about my survival at that moment, but I thought that it could still come in handy in the future. I grabbed the gun and pulled it, only to realize that the hand holding it was not yet dead. The man I thought to be dead opened his eyes and looked at me. He was too weak to form words, but he had enough strength to form a scowl. He recognized me. He knew it was me who let the crawler in. A shot rang, and I tumbled down the flight of stairs, clutching my side. The pain instantly snapped me back to reality, my survival instincts coming back online. I wanted to live. I wanted to live no matter how bleak my future looked. What if the crawler heard it? What if something else heard it? I'm losing blood. I need to hurry. My brain was producing one rushed thought after another. I descended into the basement, squeezing my wound. I could barely see in the darkness, but luckily, I was alone in there. I pulled the handle of the door that led to my stairwell. Nothing. I pulled at it again. It still didn't budge. It wasn't that I was too weak to open it. It was locked. I looked back at the windows lining the wall and I knocked on the door. I was too scared to shout for someone to open. I knocked again and I heard some noises, but they weren't coming from the other side of the door. They were coming from the apartment where I had left the bait. It seemed that the ape finally took it. I heard its roar, heard the noise with which the grates were separated from the wall, and I shuddered. I had nowhere to run. I was cornered. If it could smell the blood on me, I could feel that my palm was full of blood, and there was probably a trail of blood drops behind me. My only hope was that it would be drawn towards the bloodbath on the 2nd floor. I sat down near the door and I closed my eyes. There was no point in staying alert. If anything, I had to make sure I would make as few sounds as possible. The sounds were starting to get quiet. The last thing I heard was its footsteps as it entered the stairwell and sniffed the air. That's where I was found in the morning, lying unconscious from all the blood loss right next to the door. Thankfully, someone had found me before I froze to death, otherwise you wouldn't be reading this. Throughout the last week, I was trying to recover my strength. Natasha was taking good care of me, and thankfully, she found penicillin somewhere, so I didn't have to worry about infections. It did a trick on my digestive system though, which was less than ideal in my situation. The bullet had went clean through, though there were 2 wounds on me. At least they didn't have to cut it out. I'm starting to regain my strength bit by bit, but with our limited food sources, it was tough. In fact, we're going to run out of food in just a few days. The tenants pulled all their food and started rationing it. A surprising development for sure. But very soon, there will be none left. I heard that some men were trying to raid nearby grocery stores. Not all of them returned. They hope that once I recover, I'll join them. I can't object to that. They had been feeding me for the last week after all. But I can't help but think that we need to get out. Once the food runs out, we'll be too weak to do that. So, my next update will probably be the last one. Sorry for not writing for so long. It just seemed pointless for the longest time, but I guess I have to say goodbye. It would be impolite to do otherwise. Little by little, I'm beginning to walk. The strength has been coming back very slowly to me, ounce by ounce. With my poor diet, my body had to cannibalize some muscle tissue in order to heal the wound. It's going to leave an ugly scar too. Right now, I have a hole in my side filled to the brim with scar tissue. I can't help but poke it all the time, even though it's disgusting. Of course, I won't be going for any food raids anytime soon. I might be able to descend down the rope, but to climb back up while carrying a dozen kilos of food on me, that's just impossible. I'll repeat the fate of that old man who couldn't get back inside. So for the past week, I've been lying in bed in Natasha's apartment. I guess you could say it's become a hospital of sorts. She takes care of both me and the old man. One boiled potato per day for each of us. She's been boiling them all while using the same pot of water. Says it'll make a nice soup when we're out of everything else. Maxim and the other men try to raid the local grocery stores nearby, but each raid gets more difficult than the last, mostly because half of the time somebody doesn't return. They would take the guns that they had found in the bandits' hideout, but from what I've been told, they're not much use, and the gunshots usually imply that something is living out there last seconds in terror. I don't hear much about the outside except for some rumors. Before I was locked inside the apartment complex, but now it feels like the danger lurks right beyond the door's threshold, beyond our windows. It feels like my fortress that used to be the whole building shrunk to fit inside Natasha's apartment. And with my limited mobility, I can't feel safe outside of her apartment. We're almost out of food. I can hear people bickering with each other more and more. It seems to head in a nasty direction. And each time Natasha steps out of her apartment, I fear that she might not return. She says that crazy things go on outside. The things that just a month or even 2 weeks ago would make my hair stand up. But now I'm just too tired and exhausted with all this BS to react. I feel like the same goes for everyone else in the building. Natasha says that a mysterious human figure has been spotted right on the very verge of the forest. It signaled to the observers to come out and follow it, and then disappeared in the forest. It seemed impossible for it to be one of these survivors. On another day, the tenants from one of the apartments started screaming that their voices in their heads were too loud. I would believe that it was just madness taking it over if it was just one person, but all three of them. That was just very unlikely. After a few nights before, we all woke up from the stampede. Hundreds of legs were rushing from the forest past our house and into the town. I could feel the building tremble from vibrations their mighty feet were sending into the ground, and these screeches of many beasts were mixing together, to a point where it was hard to tell which one I had heard before. No one dared look out the window. We were all just hoping that they had all passed and let us continue living on our pointless lives. After they had passed, we could hear gunshots firing off in the distance throughout the whole next day. The sounds of shots got the old man quite agitated. I never managed to get more than a few coherent sentences at a time out of him. It seems that the physical toll of his body as well as whatever guilt he's been feeling has made him lose it bit by bit. He talked about a place far in the forest. He was confusing things, so I'm not quite sure what it was. In some stories, it's a town, and in others, a base in the forest. Sometimes it's a lab and sometimes an archaeological dig. It was built by the Soviets and it's been there long ago. But in all stories, one word always came up. The door. He had worked there as an intern. He says that our entire town was built by the Soviets precisely because of that location. It was a closed-off town though, one that wasn't on any maps, even on the secret ones. Our town was a place where all these scientists and personnel lived. He said that he got his apartment back when he was assigned to the project, and was very proud of being a homeowner at a young age. Whatever they had been doing there, the higher-ups ended up disappointed with the results. so the project was closed and the town was declassified, even before the fall of the Union. He said that he had forgotten what he had seen there until a month ago. But now, despite decades of abandonment, something was happening there again. Something that unleashed the hordes of these monsters. As the man himself said it, "Something on the other side has finally made contact with us. 40 years after we sent out our first signal." He didn't elaborate on what the other side was, or where the beasts were coming from in such volume. Soon after, he shut himself off from the world around him, and he wouldn't talk anymore. 2 days ago, the mysterious figure was back again, and this time, I got a good look at it. A long black winter jacket with a hood that obscured its face. A dark spot so clearly visible on the snow. I say it because, despite it looking completely human, I can't accept it as such. The only thing different was that, on that day, some people had followed it into the woods. I was almost one of them. The voice that I had heard in my head was just too alluring to ignore. Yesterday, it came back again, and once more, with a wave of its hand, people started crawling out of windows to follow it. Some were just hanging over rails and falling down into the snow from the second floor, before getting up and following its call, ignoring the cold and broken appendages. I had to restrain Natasha from following it. It seems that some people are more susceptible to its call, and so she answered it. I was fighting her for a good 5 minutes. She didn't hit or bite me. She was just silently pushing with her whole body towards the door, trying to get out of the building and follow it. I was shouting at her, even hitting her to bring her back to her senses, all the while feeling the strength leave my already weakened body. And throughout all that, I could almost feel the creature's awaiting gaze, piercing through these solid walls and judgingly looking over Natasha, disapproving that she was making it wait for her. Finally, it left, and Natasha came back to her senses. I almost burst out crying when I realized that she was back with me. Over the last few weeks, she'd become the closest person to me, almost like a sister. To see her back to her senses was a great relief. But then the chill, cold air passed us, and with the terror, we realized that we were the only 2 people left in the apartment. The old man left and he didn't bother to close the window behind him. Seeing as it was the 5th floor, we didn't risk looking out to see if he'd survived. We knew the answer. We simply closed the window. Today, the mysterious figure, the haunted Pied Piper, will undoubtedly return. And this time, we all may fall victim to his call. So, we have no choice but to abandon the ship. There are no more than 10 people left in the building, and we're all ready to leave. We've eaten all the food we've had. There's no point in carrying it on us anymore. We put on the warmest clothes we've had to combat winter, and we've all prepared the makeshift weapons. Some sharpen their brooms, but I decided to stick with my hatchet. I'm so convinced that it's the best weapon I have. We're leaving in 5 minutes, and Natasha's pouring potato soup into cups. Our last meal in this building. We don't know where we'll go and how far we'll get, but I'm sure of one thing. We'll be safer away from the forest. We might even travel from one building to another. After all, we doubt the people closed their apartments before evacuating, so who knows, we might survive. We'll head somewhere far away from the military, away from the creatures. I'm sure we'll find a way. And if in the future I'm not maimed or shot, and I finally have a moment to sit down and safely recount what I've been through, I'll let you all know. So keep your fingers crossed for me, and hopefully, I'll talk to you soon.